The weeks that followed Sophie's 8th birthday party unfolded like pages in the photo album Victoria had gifted them. Each day brought subtle shifts in their carefully constructed routine, small moments that accumulated like droplets, eventually forming a river. Ethan found himself anticipating Victoria's arrival at their Saturday morning breakfast the way she'd knock precisely 3 times before Sophie would rush to the door, her small feet thundering against the hardwood floors. "Miss Victoria's here," Sophie would announce as if the entire neighborhood needed to know, and Victoria would step inside carrying fresh pastries from the bakery downtown, her weekend attire so different from the sharp suits she wore to the office. In jeans and soft sweaters, she looked younger, more vulnerable, like the woman he'd driven home that night months ago. The transformation wasn't just in Victoria. Ethan noticed it in himself too, in the way he'd started caring about things he hadn't thought about in years. He'd catch himself checking his reflection before she arrived, running a hand through his hair, wondering if the shirt he'd chosen was too casual or not casual enough. Sophie had noticed too, with the uncanny perception children possess when the adult world shifts around them. "Dad, you're wearing cologne," Sophie observed one Saturday morning, wrinkling her nose as she sat at the kitchen table, her legs swinging beneath her chair. "You never wear cologne except for church." Ethan felt heat rise to his cheeks as he flipped pancakes on the griddle, the batter sizzling in perfect circles. "Sometimes it's nice to smell good, Soph." "You smell good anyway," she said matter-of-factly, returning to her coloring book. "Like laundry and coffee, and sometimes like the garage when you fix things." Victoria arrived moments later, and Ethan watched as she and Sophie fell into what had become their ritual. Sophie would show Victoria her latest art project or school assignment, and Victoria would examine it with the same intensity she brought to quarterly reports, asking questions that made Sophie beam with pride. It was during these moments that Ethan saw glimpses of the mother Victoria might have been, could have been, if life hadn't stolen those chances from her. "This is exceptional work, Sophie," Victoria said that morning, studying a drawing of a house with 3 figures standing in front of it. Ethan recognized himself in Sophie immediately, but the third figure, a woman with dark hair and a red dress, was new. "Who's this?" Sophie looked up at Victoria with those innocent eyes that could unravel the most guarded heart. "That's you. You're part of our family picture now." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy with meaning. Victoria's eyes glistened as she carefully set the drawing down, her fingers trembling slightly. Ethan moved from the stove, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder, feeling the tension there, the weight of emotions she was still learning to carry openly. "Sophie's right," he said quietly. "You are family." Victoria looked up at him then, and in her eyes he saw years of loneliness dissolving like morning frost under sunlight. She reached up, placing her hand over his, and for a moment they stayed like that, connected by touch and understanding, while Sophie continued coloring, humming a tune from her favorite movie. The moment was broken by the smoke alarm's shrill cry. Ethan rushed back to the stove where the last pancake had turned to charcoal, and they all laughed, the tension breaking like a wave against rocks. Victoria opened windows while Ethan scraped the burnt remains into the trash, and Sophie stood on a chair fanning the alarm with a dish towel, all of them working together with the ease of people who had done this dance before, even though they hadn't. "I think we need a new breakfast plan," Victoria suggested, still laughing. "How about I take you both out? There's a place downtown that makes crepes Sophie might like." Sophie's eyes widened. "What are crepes?" "Fancy pancakes," Ethan explained, lifting her down from the chair. "Really thin, fancy pancakes that French people eat. Can we put chocolate in them?" "We can put anything you want in them," Victoria promised, and Ethan saw Sophie's face light up with the kind of joy that had become more frequent since Victoria entered their lives. The restaurant was busier than expected, filled with weekend families and the cheerful chaos of children's voices mixing with the clink of silverware against plates. They waited for a table, Sophie between them holding both their hands, as she chattered about her upcoming school play, where she was playing a tree. "But not just any tree," she explained seriously. "The most important tree, the one that gives advice to the lost princess." "That sounds like a very important role," Victoria agreed. "Will you need a costume?" "Dad's making it," Sophie said proudly. "He's really good at making things." Ethan felt Victoria's eyes on him. You make costumes too. Badly, he admitted. Last year I tried to make her a butterfly costume for Halloween. She ended up looking more like a moth that had been through a windstorm. It was still beautiful, Sophie defended loyally, and nobody else had one like it. When they were finally seated, Ethan watched Victoria help Sophie with the menu, explaining each option patiently, and he was struck by how natural this felt, how right. For years it had been just him and Sophie against the world, and he'd convinced himself that was enough. But seeing them together, watching Sophie bloom under Victoria's attention, seeing Victoria shed layers of corporate armor to reveal the warm, caring woman beneath, he realized how much they'd both been missing. The crepes arrived, Sophie's loaded with Nutella and strawberries, Victoria's filled with spinach and Gruyere, and Ethan's stuffed with ham and Swiss. They shared bites. Sophie insisting everyone try hers, getting chocolate on her nose in the process. Victoria reached across with a napkin to wipe it off, such a simple maternal gesture that it made Ethan's chest tight with emotion. My mom used to do that, Sophie said suddenly, and the table went still. Sophie rarely mentioned her mother Rachel, who had left when Sophie was barely 2, unable to handle the responsibility of parenthood, choosing freedom over family. I don't remember much, but I remember her wiping my face. Her hand smelled like flowers. Victoria's hand paused, the napkin still in her fingers. That's a beautiful memory to have, sweetheart. Do you have memories of your mom? Sophie asked with the directness only children possess. Victoria smiled softly. I do. She used to sing while she cooked. Terrible singer, actually, but she didn't care. She'd dance around the kitchen with a wooden spoon as a microphone, making up lyrics when she forgot the real ones. Did she teach you to cook? She tried. Victoria laughed. I was a disaster. I once tried to make her breakfast in bed for Mother's Day and nearly burned down the kitchen. She ate every bite of those burnt eggs and told me they were perfect. That's what love looks like, Sophie said sagely, and both adults stared at her, amazed by the wisdom that sometimes fell from 8-year-old lips. After breakfast, they walked through the downtown market, Sophie running ahead to look at flower stalls and street performers always staying within sight. Victoria and Ethan walked side by side, their shoulders occasionally brushing each contact, sending small shocks through Ethan's system. She's remarkable, Victoria said, watching Sophie chat animatedly with a woman selling handmade jewelry. You've done an incredible job raising her. I've done my best, Ethan replied. Some days I feel like I'm failing her, like she needs more than I can give. Victoria stopped walking, turning to face him fully. Ethan, that little girl is confident, kind, creative, and full of joy. That's not accident. That's you. That's what you've given her. And lately that's been you too, he said, meeting her eyes. She's different since you've been around. Happier. More complete. Victoria looked away, but not before he saw the emotion flooding her features. I never thought I'd have this, she whispered. After everything, after all the loss, I'd convinced myself I was meant to be alone. That it was safer that way. And now, she looked back at him, and in her eyes was a vulnerability he'd only seen glimpses of before. Now I can't imagine my life without you both in it. The confession hung between them, delicate as spun glass. Ethan wanted to reach for her, to pull her close and tell her she'd never have to imagine it, but Sophie came running back holding a small potted orchid. Can we get this for Miss Victoria? She asked breathlessly. The lady says orchids mean love and beauty and strength, and that's just like her. Victoria knelt down, pulling Sophie into a hug that lasted longer than usual, her face hidden in Sophie's wild curls. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. Thank you, sweetheart. That's the most beautiful gift anyone's ever wanted to give me. They bought the orchid, of course, and Sophie insisted on carrying it herself, carefully cradling the pot as they continued through the market. They stopped to watch a juggler, Sophie laughing as balls flew through the air in impossible patterns. Victoria stood behind Sophie, her hands on the girl's shoulders, and Ethan stood beside them, his hand finding its way to Victoria's back, a protective, possessive gesture that felt as natural as breathing. A photographer approached them, one of those street artists who captured families for a small fee. Beautiful family, he said. Let me take your picture. Before Ethan could correct him, explain the complexity of their situation. Sophie was already nodding enthusiastically, and Victoria was smiling, and somehow they were arranging themselves for a photo. Sophie in the middle, holding her orchid, Victoria and Ethan on either side, their arms around each other as if they'd done this 1,000 times before. When the photographer showed them the digital preview, Ethan's breath caught. They looked like a family. Not like three people pretending, not like fragments trying to form a whole, but like a real family, complete and perfect in their imperfection. "We'll take 3 copies," Victoria said, pulling out her wallet before Ethan could protest. That evening, after they'd returned home, and Sophie was in the bath, Victoria and Ethan sat on the back porch watching the sun set over the fence line. The spring air was warm but not yet humid, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine from the neighbor's yard. "I should tell you something," Victoria said, her voice carefully controlled in a way that made Ethan nervous. "About work." His stomach dropped. Was she pulling back? Had they crossed too many professional lines? "What about it?" "I've been thinking about the new position I created for you. The flexible hours, the increased pay." "Victoria, if people are talking, if it's causing problems..." She turned to him, placing a finger against his lips to silence him. "No, that's not it. I want to do more. I want to make you a partner in the firm, Ethan. A real partner with equity and decision-making power. You've brought something to the company that was missing, something I didn't even realize we needed." Ethan stared at her, stunned. "Victoria, I can't accept that. People will think..." "I don't care what people think," she said firmly. "For the first time in my life, I genuinely don't care. What I care about is building something real, something lasting. In business, yes, but more importantly, in life, with you, with Sophie." "What are you saying?" She took a deep breath, and he could see her gathering courage the way she might before a crucial board meeting. "I'm saying that I'm falling in love with you, Ethan. With both of you. And I know it's complicated. I know there are a million reasons why this is messy and difficult, but I've lived my whole life by the rules, by what's appropriate and professional and safe, and where did it get me? Alone in a glass tower, successful and empty." Ethan set down his beer, turning to face her fully. In the fading light, she looked vulnerable and fierce all at once. This woman who commanded boardrooms and negotiated million-dollar deals, but was trembling as she confessed her feelings on his back porch. "Victoria, he started, but she shook her head. "Please let me finish. That night you drove me home, I was at my lowest point. I'd been drinking because it was the anniversary of what would have been my due date if I hadn't lost the last baby. The third one. The one that made the doctors tell me to stop trying. I was ready to give up on everything, Ethan. Not just work or success, but everything." The weight of her words settled over him like a blanket. He reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers. "But then you saw me," she continued. "Not the CEO, not the boss, not the ice queen everyone whispers about. You saw me broken and messy and human, and you didn't turn away. You drove me home and listened and made me feel like maybe I wasn't as alone as I thought." "You're not alone," Ethan said firmly. "Not anymore." "I know I'm not what you probably envisioned," she said, her voice smaller now. "I'm older. I'm your boss. I'm complicated and damaged, and I don't know how to be a mother figure, even though Sophie seems to think I'm doing okay. I don't know how to be part of a family without trying to control everything, without being terrified I'll lose it all again." Ethan pulled her closer until she was tucked against his side, her head on his shoulder. "You want to know what I see when I look at you? I see a woman who's survived losses that would break most people. I see someone who built an empire from grief and determination. I see the way you look at Sophie like she's precious, and how you've brought light back into our home. I see a partner, Victoria, in every sense of the word." She lifted her head to look at him, and he could see the hope battling with fear in her eyes. "Do you mean that..." Instead of answering with words, Ethan did what he'd wanted to do for weeks. He kissed her soft and sure-tasting coffee and possibility on her lips. She responded immediately, her hand coming up to cup his face, and for a moment the world shrunk to just this two people finding each other in the wreckage of their separate losses. "Dad?" Sophie's voice from the doorway made them spring apart like teenagers caught by parents. She stood there in her pajamas, hair damp from her bath, clutching her favorite stuffed elephant. "Are you kissing Miss Victoria?" Ethan's face burned, but Victoria surprised him by laughing. "He was sweetheart. Is that okay with you?" Sophie considered this seriously, then walked over to where they sat, climbing onto the bench between them. Does this mean you're going to get married? Whoa, slow down there, Soph, Ethan said, but Sophie was looking at Victoria with those big eyes that demanded honesty. Maybe someday, Victoria said carefully, if that's something we all want. But for now, we're just going to take things one day at a time. Is that okay? Sophie nodded, then yawned enormously. Can Victoria tuck me in tonight? If she wants to, Ethan said, looking at Victoria, who was already standing reaching for Sophie's hand. I'd love to, Victoria said, and Ethan watched them walk inside together, Sophie chattering about which story she wanted to hear, Victoria listening with the attention she usually reserved for board presentations. While they were gone, Ethan sat in the growing darkness processing everything that had just happened. In a few short months, his life had transformed completely. The woman he'd once feared as his boss had become central to his existence, to Sophie's existence. The careful boundaries he'd maintained for years had dissolved, replaced by something messier, but infinitely more rewarding. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister, Anna. Heard through the grapevine you're dating someone. When do I get to meet her? Small-town gossip traveled fast, apparently. Ethan typed back, soon. I think you'll love her. Is Sophie okay with it? He could hear Victoria's voice from Sophie's room reading with different voices for each character, Sophie's delighted giggles punctuating the story. More than okay. Then I'm happy for you, big brother. It's about time. It was about time, Ethan thought. Time to stop just surviving and start living again. Time to let someone in to risk his heart after keeping it locked away since Rachel left. Time to show Sophie that families could be built from choice, as much as blood from love discovered, as much as love lost. Victoria returned 20 minutes later, looking soft and maternal in a way that made Ethan's heart clench. She's asleep. She made me promise to be here for breakfast tomorrow. You don't have to. I want to, Victoria interrupted. If that's okay. I want all of this, Ethan. The Saturday breakfasts and bedtime stories and school plays where Sophie's a tree. I want the ordinary moments just as much as the big ones. Even the burnt pancakes, Mom. Especially the burnt pancakes, Mom. She laughed, settling back beside him on the bench. They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. Ethan thought about the photo from earlier, the three of them looking like they belonged together. He thought about Sophie's drawing the family portrait with Victoria naturally included. He thought about all the small moments that had led them here, breadcrumbs on a path he hadn't even realized he was walking. I should warn you, he said eventually. Dating a single dad isn't exactly glamorous. There are soccer practices and parent-teacher conferences and sick days where Sophie throws up everywhere. There are nightmares and tantrums and times when she'll need to come first, no matter what. I know, Victoria said simply. That's part of what I'm signing up for, all of it. And your work, the company people, are going to talk. Let them, she said with the fierce determination he recognized from the boardroom. I've spent my entire adult life building that company. If I can't use my success to choose my own happiness, what was the point of any of it? The board might have opinions about you dating an employee. Victoria smiled, a shrewd expression crossing her features. The board can have all the opinions they want. I own 53% of the company, Ethan. They can complain, but they can't stop me. Besides, you won't be just an employee for long. That partnership offer is real, and it's based on merit, not feelings. You've brought in 3 major clients in the last month alone. I didn't know you were keeping track. I keep track of everything that matters, she said, taking his hand again. And you matter. You and Sophie both matter more than anything else in my life right now. The weight of her words, the commitment they implied, should have scared him. A few months ago, they would have sent him running. But now, sitting here with her hand in his, thinking about Sophie asleep upstairs and the breakfast they'd share tomorrow, the life they were carefully constructing together, he felt only certainty. I love you, he said, the words coming easier than expected, like they'd been waiting just beneath the surface for weeks. I didn't plan on it, didn't expect it, but I do. I love who you are with Sophie. I love who you are at work when you think no one's watching. I love who you are on Saturday mornings, and who you become when you let your guard down. Victoria turned to face him fully, and in the dim light from the kitchen window, he could see tears streaming down her face. Say it again, she whispered. I love you, Victoria Hale. She kissed him, then different from before, deeper and more certain, full of promise and possibility. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, she rested her forehead against his. I love you too, she said. Both of you. I never thought I'd have a family again, never thought I deserved one after failing so many times before. But you and Sophie, you've given me something I didn't even know how to hope for anymore. They stayed on the porch for another hour, planning and dreaming in the way of new couples, even though nothing about their situation was typical. They talked about taking Sophie to the beach this summer, about the new clients Ethan was pursuing, about Victoria teaching Sophie to play chess, about 1,000 small futures that added up to a life together. When Victoria finally left after checking on Sophie one more time and kissing Ethan goodnight at the door like they were teenagers with a curfew, Ethan stood in his living room looking at the space she'd occupied. Her coffee mug from the morning still sat on the side table. Sophie's drawing, the one with 3 figures, was now held to the refrigerator with a magnet. The orchid sat on the kitchen windowsill, elegant and somehow perfect in his modest home. He thought about the drive home all those months ago, how he'd simply been trying to do the right thing to help someone who needed it. He couldn't have imagined it would lead to this, to love discovered in unexpected places, to a family built from broken pieces, to a future bright with possibility. Upstairs, he checked on Sophie, finding her sprawled across her bed, one arm flung over her head, the other clutching her elephant. In sleep, she looked even younger than 8, innocent and trusting in the way children should be. On her nightstand was the photo from today, already freed from its envelope and placed where she could see it first thing in the morning. We're going to be okay, baby girl, he whispered, pulling her blanket up to her chin. Better than okay. We're going to be wonderful. The next morning arrived with spring rain pattering against the windows, the kind of gentle shower that made the world smell clean and new. Ethan woke to the sound of the front door opening and closing quietly, followed by movement in the kitchen. He smiled, realizing Victoria had used the spare key he'd given her last week, ostensibly for emergencies, but both of them knowing it meant more. He found her in the kitchen, already making coffee, wearing one of his old college sweatshirts she must have borrowed on a previous visit and never returned. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she had no makeup on, and Ethan thought she'd never looked more beautiful than she did right then, comfortable and domestic in his space. You're early, he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind, feeling her lean back into him. I couldn't sleep, she admitted. I kept thinking about what you said last night about loving me. I wanted to be here when you woke up to make sure it was real. He turned her around in his arms, tilting her chin up to look at him. It's real. Every word. Even in the harsh light of morning, even with me stealing your sweatshirts and showing up uninvited. Especially then, he said, kissing her forehead. Though I'm going to need that sweatshirt back eventually. It's my favorite. Mine now, she said with a smile that transformed her face from the serious CEO to the playful woman he was still discovering. Sophie appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes, her elephant dragging behind her. She looked at them embracing and smiled sleepily. Are you living here now, Miss Victoria? Victoria looked at Ethan, a question in her eyes. They hadn't discussed this yet, the practical aspects of blending their lives together. Not yet, sweetheart, Victoria said carefully. But I'll be around a lot more if that's okay with you. Sophie patted over to them, wrapping her small arms around both their legs in a 3-way hug. It's more than okay. It's perfect. Over Sophie's head, Victoria and Ethan's eyes met, and in that look was everything they couldn't say. Yet the promises they'd make, the home they'd build, the love they'd nurture. It wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges ahead, complications to navigate, judgments to weather. Victoria would have to learn to be a parent figure. Ethan would have to learn to share the responsibility he'd carried alone for so long. And Sophie would have to adjust to their new dynamic. But standing there in the kitchen rain, painting patterns on the windows, coffee brewing, and Sophie humming between them, Ethan knew they'd figure it out. They'd already survived the hardest part, the loneliness, the loss, the fear of never finding this again. Everything else was just details. So, Sophie said, pulling back to look up at them with bright eyes, can we have chocolate chip pancakes today? And can Victoria help make them so they don't burn? They laughed, all three of them, the sound filling the kitchen like music. Yes, Ethan said, ruffling Sophie's hair. Victoria can definitely help. Good, Sophie declared, then paused thoughtfully. And maybe tomorrow she can teach us how to make those fancy crepes at home. I'd love that, Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. As they moved around the kitchen together, Sophie measuring flour with Victoria's help, while Ethan mixed ingredients, he caught glimpses of their future in these small moments. He saw years of Sunday breakfasts and homework help of birthday parties and holiday traditions they'd create together. He saw Victoria teaching Sophie about strength and ambition. Sophie teaching Victoria about joy and spontaneity. He saw himself loving them both, protecting them both, building a life rich with the kind of happiness he'd stopped believing in. The pancakes miraculously didn't burn. They ate them at the kitchen table, Sophie chattering about her upcoming field trip to the Science Museum, Victoria asking questions and suggesting they all go together on the weekend to see the exhibit Sophie would miss. It was normal and extraordinary all at once, this simple morning that marked the beginning of their real life together. Later, after Victoria had braided Sophie's hair for school, and Ethan had packed her lunch with a note that said, "We love you," instead of just "Love, Dad." After they'd stood together at the door waving goodbye to the school bus, Victoria turned to him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "What?" he asked, suddenly nervous. "I just realized something," she said, wonder in her voice. "For the first time in years, I'm not dreading Monday morning. I'm not trying to fill the weekend with work to avoid thinking about what I don't have. I'm just happy. Here with you." He pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her shampoo mixed with his sweatshirt, this perfect combination of their lives merging. "That's what happens when you stop driving alone," he said, remembering that night the drive that started everything. "When you let someone else in the car with you." She laughed against his chest. "Best detour I ever took." "Best passenger I ever picked up," he countered. They stood there in the doorway holding each other as the morning rain continued to fall, washing the world clean for new beginnings. Somewhere across town, Sophie was telling her teacher about her weekend, about how her dad and Miss Victoria were dating now, and how they were becoming a real family. At the office, people would whisper and speculate about the CEO's new relationship, about the changes everyone could see in her. But here, in this moment, in this house, that had sheltered Ethan's broken heart and was now expanding to hold 3 instead of 2, none of that mattered. What mattered was the coffee getting cold on the counter, the breakfast dishes that needed washing, the ordinary, blessed, mundane reality of building a life with someone. What mattered was Victoria's head on his shoulder and the promise of all the mornings to come, no longer alone but together, no longer broken but whole, no longer surviving but truly, finally living. The rain stopped just before noon sun breaking through the clouds in golden streams that made everything shimmer. Victoria had reluctantly left for a conference call she couldn't reschedule, but not before making plans for dinner for the weekend for a vacation in July when Sophie would be out of school. Each plan was a thread weaving them tighter together, creating a tapestry of shared experiences that would become their story. Ethan stood in Sophie's room, picking up the clothes she'd discarded in her morning rush, and found himself staring at the photo on her nightstand again. The photographer had captured something magical, the exact moment when 3 separate people became a family. Not through blood or law or obligation, but through choice, through love, through the brave decision to try again after loss had taught them all to be careful with their hearts. His phone rang, Victoria's name lighting up the screen. "Miss me already?" he answered, unable to keep the smile from his voice. "Always," she said simply, and he could hear the truth of it, the way missing him had become part of her routine, as natural as breathing. "But I'm actually calling because I just got an interesting email. There's a house for sale in Sophie's school district. 4 bedrooms, big backyard, perfect for a family. The seller is motivated, and I thought, maybe we could look at it together." The implication of her words, the future she was proposing, should have terrified him. Instead, he felt only rightness, like puzzle pieces clicking into place. "Are you asking me to house hunt with you, Victoria Hale?" "I'm asking you to build a home with me, Ethan Ward," she corrected. "All 3 of us. Somewhere that's ours from the beginning, not mine or yours, but ours." He thought about this house, the memories it held of his marriage falling apart, of years struggling alone, of the slow rebuild after Rachel left. It had served its purpose, sheltered them through the storm. But maybe Victoria was right. Maybe it was time for something new, something chosen together, something that would only know happiness because they'd create it that way. "Send me the listing," he said. "We'll go look this weekend, all three of us." "Really?" The hope in her voice made his chest tight. "Really. Sophie's been saying she wants a bigger room anyway, and a backyard with space for a swing set. And maybe a home office where I can work when I want to be close to you both," Victoria added softly. "And a kitchen big enough for all of us to cook together without burning things." Ethan laughed. "A dining room for family dinners. A porch for watching sunsets. A life," Victoria said, her voice full of wonder. "A real life together." "Yes," Ethan agreed. "All of that and more." They talked for a few more minutes about practical things, mortgage rates and school districts, and the logistics of blending two successful careers with raising a child. But underneath the mundane details was something electric, the energy of lives transforming, of love, refusing to stay within the boundaries they'd drawn for themselves. After they hung up, Ethan stood in the afternoon light filtering through Sophie's window and let himself imagine it fully for the first time, coming home to Victoria every night, waking up beside her every morning, watching Sophie grow up with two parents who loved her fiercely. He imagined holidays with extended family. Victoria's parents flying in from Florida, his sister Anna finally getting to meet the woman who'd changed their lives. He imagined challenges too. The arguments they'd have about money or discipline, or the 1,000 small negotiations required to merge two adult lives. But even those seemed less like obstacles and more like opportunities to know each other deeper, to choose each other again and again. The doorbell rang, pulling him from his reverie. A delivery driver stood on the porch with an enormous bouquet of flowers, every color imaginable, arranged in an explosion of beauty. "Ethan Ward," the driver confirmed. "That's me." "These are for you, sir. Have a great day." Ethan carried the arrangement inside, finding the card nestled among the blooms. Victoria's precise handwriting spelled out a simple message: "Thank you for seeing me, for choosing me, for loving me. Forever yours, V." He placed the flowers on the kitchen table where Sophie would see them when she got home, where they'd brighten the room with promise. Then he grabbed his phone and typed a message to Victoria. "You've got it backwards. Thank you for letting yourself be seen, for choosing us, for loving us back. Forever yours, E." Her response came quickly, just a heart emoji followed by, "How did I get so lucky?" Ethan thought about that night months ago, about the split-second decision to offer his boss a ride home, about how the smallest choices sometimes led to the biggest changes. Luck had nothing to do with it, he realized. It was brave kindness meeting desperate need, two broken hearts, recognizing each other across the divide of propriety and position, the courage to build something new from the rubble of what had been lost. Sophie's bus would arrive soon, bringing her home with stories of her day and homework that needed doing, and probably a new art project featuring the three of them, because that seemed to be her favorite subject lately. Victoria would come for dinner, and they'd tell Sophie about the house they wanted to see, watch her excitement at the possibility of a bigger room and a backyard with space for the swing set she'd been wanting. They'd do dishes together, the three of them, Sophie on her step stool between them, all of them working in harmony. They were still learning, but that felt more natural every day. And later, after Sophie was asleep, he and Victoria would sit on the porch, despite the spring chill, planning their future, with the careful hope of people who'd lost before, but were brave enough to try again. They'd talk about the partnership at the firm, about the changes that would come about, how to weather the scrutiny and judgment that would inevitably follow. But mostly they'd just be together, existing in the space between what was and what would be, in the precious present where love lived and breathed and grew stronger with each passing moment. The sound of the school bus pulling up interrupted his thoughts. Ethan walked to the door, watching Sophie bounce down the steps, her backpack bouncing her face bright with the joy of being 8 and loved and secure in her world. She ran toward the house, toward him, toward the future they were all building together, and Ethan opened the door wide to let her in, to let love in, to let life in all its messy, beautiful, unexpected glory fill their home once more. "Dad, Dad, you'll never guess what happened today." Sophie burst through the door, words tumbling over each other in her excitement. Mrs. Patterson said my story about our family was the best one in the class, and she wants to put it in the school newsletter. And can Victoria come to the author's tea next week because I wrote about her too, and she stopped mid-sentence spotting the flowers. Oh, wow, are those from Victoria Set? They are. Ethan confirmed, helping her out of her backpack. She wanted to brighten up our day. But Sophie walked around the arrangement, examining it from every angle with the seriousness of an art critic. She picked all the happy colors, she observed. No sad flowers at all. That's right, sweetheart. No sad flowers at all. Ethan agreed, watching as Sophie gently touched one of the bright gerbera daisies. The afternoon sun streaming through the kitchen window caught the petals, making them glow like small suns themselves. Sophie pulled a folded paper from her pocket, smoothing it carefully on the table beside the flowers. Want to read my story? Mrs. Patterson said it made her cry, but in a good way. Ethan sat down, pulling Sophie onto his lap as he unfolded the paper. Her handwriting, still wobbly but determined, filled the page. My Family by Sophie Ward. My family is different than before. It used to be just me and Dad, and that was good, but sometimes quiet. Now we have Victoria, too. She's not my mom, but she loves me like one. Dad smiles more now. He sings in the shower, which he never did before. Victoria teaches me big words and how to stand up straight, and she never misses my soccer games, even when she has important meetings. The story continued, to each line a testament to the transformation their lives had undergone. Sophie had noticed everything, the way Victoria had gradually moved items into their home, how she and Ethan looked at each other when they thought no one was watching, how their hugs lasted longer, now how laughter filled spaces that used to echo with silence. This is beautiful, Soph, Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. Victoria's gonna love it. She can come to the author's tea, right? All the kids are bringing their families. Of course she can come. She wouldn't miss it for the world. Sophie bounced off his lap, energy renewed. I'm going to make her a special invitation with glitter and everything. As Sophie raced upstairs to gather her art supplies, Ethan's phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. In the most boring meeting of my life. Send help or pictures of Sophie. Either works. He smiled quickly, snapping a photo of Sophie's story and sending it along. The response was immediate. Now I'm crying in a board meeting. Thanks for that. Tell Sophie I'll be at that author's tea if I have to move heaven and earth. When Victoria arrived for dinner that evening, Sophie practically tackled her at the door, the glitter-covered invitation clutched in her small hands. Victoria read it with the same attention she gave to million-dollar contracts, her eyes growing misty at Sophie's careful lettering. Please come to my author's tea. You're part of my story. Love, Sophie. I wouldn't miss it for anything, Victoria promised, pulling Sophie into a tight hug. Over Sophie's head she met Ethan's eyes, and he saw everything there: gratitude, love, the overwhelming realization of being chosen by a child who had no obligation to love her, but did anyway. Dinner was a lively affair, Sophie, chattering about the house they were going to look at on Saturday, already planning where her art corner would be and insisting they needed a big tree for a swing. Victoria had brought dessert homemade brownies that were slightly lopsided but made with love, and Sophie declared them the best brownies ever created, even better than the bakery ones. Did you really make these yourself? Sophie asked, chocolate smeared on her chin. I did. Your dad's been teaching me to cook. I'm still not very good at it, but I'm learning. That's okay, Sophie said sagely. Dad says the best things are worth working for. After dinner, they settled into what had become their evening routine. Sophie did homework at the kitchen table while Victoria reviewed contracts beside her, occasionally helping with math problems. Ethan cleaned up from dinner, listening to their quiet conversation, the domestic symphony of pencils on paper and pages turning, and Sophie's occasional frustrated sighs when she encountered a difficult problem. This one's hard, Sophie complained, staring at her worksheet. Victoria leaned over, studying the problem. It is hard, but you know what I do when something's hard at work? What? I break it into smaller pieces. Look, if we solve this part first. Ethan watched them work through the problem together. Victoria's patience endless. Sophie's face lighting up when she finally understood. These were the moments that didn't make it into photo albums or social media posts, but were the true foundation of family. The quiet, unremarkable evenings where love was shown through presence and patience and the simple act of being there. Later, after Sophie was in bed, Ethan and Victoria sat on the couch, her feet in his lap, as she continued working through her contracts. The comfortable silence between them was punctuated only by the scratch of her pen and the distant sound of crickets beginning their spring chorus. "The Hendersons are getting divorced," Victoria said suddenly, setting down her work. "The Hendersons from your firm." She nodded. 23 years of marriage, 2 kids in college, and they're calling it quits. She said they just grew apart, stopped seeing each other somewhere along the way. Ethan's hands stilled on her feet. "Does that scare you? The possibility of that happening to us?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment, considering. "It used to. When James died, I thought that was the worst thing, losing someone you loved to death. But watching the Hendersons, I realized there's another kind of loss. The slow fade where you wake up next to a stranger and can't remember when they became one." "That won't be us," Ethan said firmly. "How do you know?" He tugged her closer until she was curled against his side. "Because we've both already been through the worst. You lost James and the babies. I lost Rachel not to death, but to choice, which has its own kind of sting. We know what it's like to be alone, Victoria. We know the value of what we have because we know the cost of losing it." She lifted her head to look at him. "When did you become so wise?" "Tuesday," he deadpanned, making her laugh. "I'm serious, though," she continued. "The Hendersons probably thought they'd make it, too. Everyone does in the beginning." Ethan thought about how to answer, how to ease the fear he could see creeping into her eyes, the same fear that sometimes woke him at night, the voice that whispered this was too good to last. "You're right," he said finally. "Everyone thinks they'll make it, but not everyone drives their drunk boss home from a party. Not everyone chooses to love a single dad with a complicated history. Not everyone gets a second chance and recognizes it for what it is, precious and fragile and worth protecting." "We're not going to be the Hendersons," Victoria said, and it sounded like a vow. "No," Ethan agreed. "We're going to be the Wards." Victoria stilled. The Wards. He hadn't meant to say it, hadn't planned this moment, but now that the words were out, he didn't want to take them back. "Eventually, when you're ready, when we're ready. But yes, Victoria, someday I want you to be a Ward. I want it official and legal and permanent. I want Sophie to have a mom who chose her, who fought to be in her life. I want to wake up every morning knowing you're my wife, not just my girlfriend or partner, but my wife." Victoria was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. "Ethan." "I'm not proposing," he clarified quickly. "Not yet. We need more time, need to blend our lives more fully, but I want you to know that's where I'm headed. That's what I'm building toward. A life where you're Victoria Ward, where Sophie has 2 parents at every school event, where the house we're looking at becomes our home in every legal sense." "Yes," Victoria whispered. "Yes. Yes to all of it, to taking time to doing this right, but also yes to the future where I'm Victoria Ward, and Sophie calls me Mom if she wants to, and we have family portraits taken every year and argue about where to spend holidays and all of it. Yes, Ethan. Yes to everything." He kissed her, then deep and slow a promise sealed between them. When they pulled apart, Victoria was smiling through her tears. "Sophie's going to be thrilled," she said. "She asked me last week if she could call me Mom. I told her she should talk to you first." "What do you want?" "I want whatever feels right for her. Mom Victoria Fiv. I don't care what she calls me as long as I get to be there for her." They heard footsteps on the stairs before Sophie appeared in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. "I had a bad dream," she said, her voice small. Without hesitation, Victoria opened her arms and Sophie crawled into them, settling between Victoria and Ethan on the couch. "Want to tell us about it?" Victoria asked, smoothing Sophie's hair. "I dreamed you went away," Sophie said, clinging to Victoria's shirt, "that you decided we were too much trouble and left." Victoria's arms tightened around Sophie. "Oh, sweetheart, I'm not going anywhere, ever. Promise?" "I promise. You and your dad are stuck with me." "Good," Sophie said, already relaxing. "Because I already told everyone at school you're my bonus mom." "Bonus mom?" Ethan asked. Sophie nodded against Victoria's chest. "Lily Johnson has a stepmom, but she doesn't like that word, so she calls her a bonus mom. like an extra special addition to the family. I love that, Victoria said, her voice cracking slightly. Is that what you want to call me? For now, Sophie said sleepily. Maybe just Mom later when you and Dad get married. Ethan and Victoria exchanged looks over Sophie's head, both smiling at her matter-of-fact assumption about their future. Let's get you back to bed, sweetheart, Ethan said, starting to lift her. Can Victoria tuck me in again? Of course. As Victoria carried Sophie upstairs, Ethan heard Sophie ask, Will you tell me a story about when you were little? What kind of story would you like? A happy one, about your family. Victoria's voice drifted down as they climbed the stairs. Well, when I was about your age, my grandmother taught me to make pasta from scratch. Ethan stayed on the couch, listening to the murmur of Victoria's voice from upstairs, the house settling around them with comfortable creaks and sighs. His phone lit up with an email from the realtor about their Saturday showing, confirming the appointment and sending additional photos of the house. He scrolled through them, imagining their furniture in those rooms, Sophie's art on those walls, Victoria's orchid in that sunny kitchen window. The master bedroom had an ensuite bathroom and a walk-in closet large enough for two people's belongings. There was a room that could serve as Victoria's home office, another that could be a guest room for when family visited. The backyard was expansive with mature trees perfect for a swing and space for the garden Victoria had mentioned wanting to try. But more than the physical spaces, Ethan saw the life they'd build there. Birthday parties and holiday gatherings, quiet mornings and busy evenings, the 1,000 small moments that would accumulate like treasures. He saw himself teaching Sophie to ride a bike in that driveway, saw Victoria planting flowers along that walkway, saw them all growing older and closer within those walls. Victoria returned looking soft and maternal in a way that still caught him off guard. She's asleep. She made me promise twice more that I wasn't leaving. She's been anxious about that lately, Ethan admitted. I think as she gets more attached, she gets more scared of losing you. I know the feeling, Victoria said, settling back beside him. Sometimes I wake up terrified this is all a dream, that I'll open my eyes and be back in my empty apartment, successful and alone. It's real, Ethan assured her, pulling her close. We're real. They sat quietly for a moment before Victoria spoke again. My mother called today. She wants to come visit next month. That's great. I'd love to meet her. She wants to meet you too, both of you. She said, and I quote, It's about time you found your family, darling. Your father and I were starting to worry. Were they really worried? Victoria laughed softly. Probably. I haven't introduced them to anyone since James. They'll probably overwhelm you with enthusiasm. I can handle enthusiastic parents. Remember, you haven't met Anna yet. She's already planning our wedding in her head, I guarantee it. Should we do a dinner, get all the family meetings over with at once? Ethan considered it. Actually, that might be perfect. Sophie would love having everyone together. We could do it at the new house if we get it, like a housewarming and meet the family party combined. Ambitious, Victoria noted. Going from secret relationship to hosting family gatherings in a matter of months. Go big or go home right? Speaking of going home, Victoria said, reluctantly glancing at her watch, I should head back. Early meeting tomorrow. Or, Ethan said the word hanging between them like a challenge, you could stay. They'd been careful about this, about overnight visits while Sophie was home. But something had shifted tonight with Sophie's story and her fear of Victoria leaving with their talk of marriage and the future. What about Sophie? I think she'd be thrilled to find you here in the morning. You could make breakfast together before school. Victoria bit her lip, considering. I don't have clothes for tomorrow. The bag in my closet says otherwise. She looked at him, surprised. You noticed that... I notice everything about you, Victoria Hale, including the emergency outfit you stashed here last week. It seemed presumptuous. It seemed hopeful, he corrected. Stay, please. She kissed him soft and sweet. Okay, but I'm stealing another sweatshirt to sleep in. I'm going to need to buy more sweatshirts at this rate. Or I could just leave some clothes here officially, if that's okay. More than okay. Pick a drawer, any drawer. Just a drawer to start, she said carefully. We should ease into this. Victoria, Ethan said, taking her hands. We're looking at houses together, Sophie calls you her bonus mom. We just discussed marriage. I think we're past the point of easing into anything. You're right, she laughed. When did we become those people who move at lightning speed? When we realized life's too short and too unpredictable to waste time being careful. They got ready for bed with the easy rhythm of people who'd done this dance before Victoria brushing her teeth, while Ethan set the alarm, him checking the locks while she turned off lights. It was domestic and ordinary and perfect, this preview of what their life would be like when they took the final step of moving in together. In bed, Victoria curled against him, her head on his chest, and Ethan thought about how empty his bed had felt for years, how he'd spread out to fill the space but never quite managed it. Now with Victoria here, everything felt properly proportioned again. I love you, she said into the darkness. I love you too. I love Sophie. She loves you back, fiercely. I love this life we're building. Even the complicated parts. Especially those, Victoria said. The complications mean we're really living, not just existing. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, while down the hall, Sophie slept peacefully. No longer afraid of Victoria leaving, because somehow in the way children understand things, adults complicate, she knew Victoria was home. The morning arrived with Sophie's delighted squeal when she found Victoria in the kitchen already making coffee and pancakes. You stayed. You stayed. I did, Victoria confirmed, catching Sophie as she launched herself into a hug. Is that okay? It's the best thing ever. Can you stay every night? Not every night yet, Victoria said gently. But more nights, if that's what you and your dad want. We want, Sophie said immediately, then looked at Ethan. Right, Dad? We definitely want, Ethan agreed. Accepting the coffee Victoria handed him, their fingers brushing in a way that still sent electricity through him. Breakfast was cheerful chaos. Sophie talking nonstop about showing Victoria's presents off to her friends, about the author's tea, about the new house they'd see on Saturday. Victoria braided Sophie's hair while she ate, a skill she'd been practicing, and Ethan watched them with a contentment so deep it almost scared him. After Sophie got on the bus, Victoria and Ethan stood in the doorway, both reluctant to start their separate days. This feels right, Victoria said, sending her off together. It does. Soon we'll be doing this every morning. I can't wait, Victoria said. Then laughed. Who would have thought the Ice Queen CEO would be excited about school mornings and packed lunches? You were never an Ice Queen, Ethan said firmly. You were just protecting yourself. There's a difference. Not everyone saw the difference. You did. I saw you, Ethan corrected. The real you, not the armor you wore. Victoria's phone buzzed with a reminder about her meeting. I should go, but I'll be back for dinner. You better be. Sophie will revolt if you're not here for Taco Tuesday. We have a Taco Tuesday now. We have a lot of things now, Ethan said, pulling her in for one last kiss. As Victoria drove away, Ethan stood in the doorway of the house that would soon no longer be theirs, thinking about the new memories they'd create in a new space. His phone rang Anna right on schedule. So, his sister said without preamble, when do I get to meet the woman who has my brother posting actual happy photos on social media? Soon, Ethan promised. Very soon. Good. And Ethan, I'm really happy for you, for all three of you. Thanks, Anna. That means a lot. Sophie deserves a mom who chooses her every day, and you deserve someone who sees your worth. She does. She sees everything. Then she's already family in my book. After they hung up, Ethan got ready for work, but his mind kept drifting to Victoria, to Sophie, to the life they were constructing with such care and hope. 6 months ago, he'd been a single dad going through the motions, convinced that survival was enough. Now he was planning a future that included marriage and a new house and family dinners with extended relatives. At work, people had started to notice the change in Victoria. She smiled more, left the office at reasonable hours, and had pictures on her desk now. Sophie at her soccer game, the three of them at the park, the orchid Sophie had picked out still thriving. The whispers had started speculation about the CEO's new relationship with Ethan, but Victoria handled it with grace, neither confirming nor denying, simply living her truth. Ethan had worried about the professional complications, but Victoria had been right. Her position and ownership stake made her essentially untouchable, and his work spoke for itself. If anything, their partnership had made them both better at their jobs, more creative and collaborative, bringing an energy to the company that had been missing. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. In the most boring budget meeting ever. Send Sophie pictures or I might actually fall asleep. He sent her a video Sophie had made that morning pretending to be a news reporter, announcing that her bonus mom had stayed for breakfast. Victoria's response was just heart emojis, but he could imagine her in that boardroom trying not to smile too widely at her phone. The day passed quickly, filled with client calls and project planning, but underneath everything was the anticipation of evening of returning to Victoria and Sophie of Taco Tuesday, and homework help and all the ordinary magic of their new life. When he picked Sophie up from after-school care, she was vibrating with excitement. Mrs. Patterson wants Victoria to come speak to our class about being a CEO and running a company. Can she, will she? You'll have to ask her yourself, Ethan said, knowing Victoria would move mountains to make it happen. She'll say yes, Sophie said confidently. She always says yes to important things. At home, they found Victoria already there, having left work early chopping vegetables for dinner with the focused intensity she brought to everything. She'd changed into jeans and one of Ethan's t-shirts, and her feet were bare, and she looked so perfectly at home that Ethan's heart clenched. Victoria. Sophie crashed into her, wrapping arms around her waist. Guess what? As Sophie explained about the speaking invitation, Ethan started on the meat for the tacos, working beside Victoria in the kitchen with practiced ease. They moved around each other fluidly, having learned each other's rhythms, and Sophie sat at the counter doing homework, looking up occasionally to watch them with a satisfied smile. You two are like dancers, Sophie observed, like you know where the other person will be. That's what happens when you pay attention, Victoria said, reaching past Ethan for the cheese, her hand briefly touching his back. You learned someone's patterns. Is that why you knew Dad needed you? Sophie asked with that startling directness children possessed. Because you were paying attention. Victoria paused in her chopping meeting, Ethan's eyes across the kitchen. Yes, she said simply, and because he was paying attention when I needed him too. Like that night he drove you home, Sophie said, demonstrating yet again that she knew more than the adults realized. Dad said you were sad and needed a friend. I was sad, Victoria admitted. Very sad. But your dad helped me remember that sadness doesn't last forever. Now you're happy, Sophie stated, not a question, but an observation. Now I'm very happy. Victoria agreed, her eyes still on Ethan. Dinner was filled with laughter and conversation. Sophie demonstrating her tree pose from the school play Victoria, and Ethan offering increasingly dramatic interpretations of what a wise tree might say. They did dishes together, Sophie standing on her stool between them, soap bubbles floating through the air like tiny wishes. The doorbell rang as they were finishing, surprising them all. Ethan opened it to find a delivery person with an envelope marked urgent. Victoria Hale, the delivery person asked. That's me, Victoria said, accepting the envelope with a frown. She opened it, her expression shifting from confusion to shock to something Ethan couldn't quite read. What is it? He asked, concerned. Victoria looked up, her eyes bright with tears. It's from James's parents, his mother specifically. Ethan knew about James, Victoria's late husband, but she rarely mentioned his family. Is everything okay? Victoria read aloud. Dear Victoria, we heard through mutual friends that you found love again, that you're building a family with someone who makes you smile the way James did. We wanted you to know how happy this makes us. James wouldn't want you to be alone. He'd want you to be loved, to be a mother, to have everything you two dreamed of. The ring we gave you after he passed his grandmother's ring, we want you to have it for when the time is right. Not as a reminder of what was lost, but as a blessing for what you found. Consider it a gift from James, too, his way of saying yes to your happiness. With love, Margaret and Robert. The kitchen was silent except for Sophie's confused, "Why are you both crying?" Victoria folded the letter carefully, her hands shaking. They sent his grandmother's ring, the engagement ring from the 1940s. James proposed with a different ring, but after he died, his mother gave me this one, said, I should have something of the family. I sent it back last year. I thought I didn't deserve it anymore. And now they're giving it back. They're giving their blessing, Victoria corrected. They're saying it's okay to move forward, to use a piece of the past to build a future. Ethan pulled her into his arms, feeling her shake with the force of her emotions. Sophie wrapped her arms around both their legs, creating a three-way embrace that had become their signature formation. "James sounds nice," Sophie said into the silence. "He loved you, so he must have been nice." "He was very nice," Victoria confirmed, pulling back to wipe her eyes. "He would have loved you, Sophie. He always wanted children." "Maybe he sent you to us," Sophie said with the simple faith of childhood. "Maybe he knew we needed you and you needed us." Victoria knelt down to Sophie's level, cupping her face gently. "Maybe he did, sweetheart. Maybe he did." Later, after Sophie was asleep, Victoria showed Ethan the ring. It was beautiful in its simplicity, a single diamond surrounded by smaller stones in an Art Deco setting, delicate but strong. "It's beautiful," Ethan said, understanding the weight of what she was sharing. "I never imagined I'd want to wear a ring again," Victoria admitted. "But lately I've been thinking about it, about making things official, about being Mrs. Ward. We don't have to rush in." "I know," Victoria interrupted. "But I want you to know that when you're ready, when we're ready, this is the ring I want to wear. Not because it was his, but because his parents are right. It's a blessing. It represents the fact that love doesn't die, it transforms. That you can have more than one great love in a lifetime." Ethan held her close, this woman who had transformed his life, who had brought light back into their home, who loved his daughter as her own. "Soon," he promised. "Not today, not tomorrow, but soon." "I can wait," Victoria said. "I'd wait forever for this for you both." "You won't have to wait forever," Ethan assured her. "Just long enough for us to do this right." Saturday arrived bright and clear, perfect for house hunting. Sophie had dressed carefully for the occasion, wearing her lucky dress that she insisted would help them find the perfect home. Victoria arrived early with coffee and donuts, and they set off like adventurers seeking treasure. The house was even better in person. Sophie ran from room to room, her excitement infectious, calling out discoveries. "There's a reading nook. The closet is huge. Look at this bathtub." Victoria and Ethan followed more slowly, holding hands as they took in the spaces. The kitchen was expansive, with room for all three of them to cook together. The living room had large windows that would fill the space with light. The master bedroom was a sanctuary, peaceful and private. "What do you think?" the realtor asked. Ethan looked at Victoria, who was watching Sophie spin in what would be her room, arms outstretched like she was trying to embrace the space itself. "It's perfect," Victoria said softly. "It's home." They made an offer that day, and it was accepted by evening. As they celebrated with pizza and ice cream, Sophie between them on the couch, chocolate on her face, and joy in her eyes, Ethan realized this was it. The life he'd never dared to dream of after Rachel left the family he'd thought was lost to him forever. "We're really doing this?" Victoria said, wonder in her voice. "We're really becoming a family." "We already are a family," Sophie corrected. "Now we're just getting a house to match." And she was right, Ethan thought. They were already a family bound not by blood or law, but by choice, by love, by the thousand small decisions to show up for each other every day. The house was just walls and windows, but they would fill it with laughter and memories, with burnt pancakes and perfect tacos, with homework at the kitchen table and stories at bedtime. The spring evening was warm enough to sit on the porch. After Sophie went to bed, Victoria and Ethan, planning renovations and paint colors, discussing which room would be Victoria's office and where they'd put the Christmas tree come winter. The future stretched before them, not perfect. Nothing ever was, but real and solid and theirs. "Thank you," Victoria said suddenly. "For what?" "For that night, for driving me home, for seeing past the mess I was to the person I could be." "You were never a mess," Ethan said firmly. "You were just human, and you didn't become someone different. You just let the real you come out." "The real me was pretty buried." "Not buried," Ethan disagreed. "Just waiting. Waiting for the right moment, the right people, the right love to make it safe to emerge." Victoria leaned her head on his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of the neighborhood that would soon no longer be theirs. In a few weeks, they'd be painting new walls, arranging furniture in new rooms, creating new routines in new spaces. Sophie would start third grade with two parents at orientation. Victoria's mother would visit and probably cry happy tears. Anna would help them move and definitely cry happy tears. There would be challenges, there always were. They'd have to navigate the complexities of discipline and boundaries of Victoria fully stepping into a parental role. They'd weather judgments from those who thought their relationship moved too fast or was inappropriate given their professional connection. They'd face the normal struggles of any couple learning to share space and responsibilities. But tonight with Victoria, warm beside him, and Sophie safe upstairs with a new house waiting to become their home and a future bright with possibility. Ethan felt only gratitude. Gratitude for the courage to offer a ride that night, for Victoria's bravery in accepting it, for Sophie's open heart that had room for a bonus mom, for second chances and new beginnings, and love that arrived when you least expected it. "I love you," he said into the darkness. "I love you too," Victoria replied. "Forever." "Forever," he agreed, and meant it with every fiber of his being. The moving day arrived 3 weeks later with the kind of chaos that only comes from uprooting one life to plant another. Boxes lined the hallway of their old house like cardboard soldiers, each one labeled in Victoria's precise handwriting, a skill Ethan had gratefully surrendered to after his own attempts resulted in finding kitchen utensils in boxes marked bathroom supplies. Sophie darted between the movers, clutching a box marked "Sophie's Special Things Do Not Touch," that contained her most precious possessions, including the photo from the market, her story about their family, and a dried flower from Victoria's first bouquet. She'd insisted on carrying it herself, unwilling to trust anyone else with these treasures. "Careful with that one," Victoria called out as movers lifted a particularly large box. "That's got the—" A crash interrupted her, followed by the distinctive sound of breaking glass. "The wedding china," she finished with a sigh. It was James's family china, something she'd kept in storage for years, unable to part with it, but also unable to use it. Ethan appeared at her side immediately. "I'm sorry. We can try to—" "No," Victoria said, surprising herself with how calm she felt. "It's okay. It's okay. They were his family's dishes. Maybe it's time to let them go and get our own. Something we choose together." "Are you sure?" She looked at him. This man who'd become her anchor, her home, her second chance at everything. "I'm sure. The past had its place, but this is our future. We should fill it with things that are ours from the beginning." Anna arrived just as the last boxes were being loaded, her arms full of sandwiches and drinks for everyone. "Can't have you starving on moving day," she announced, then stopped short when she saw Victoria. "Oh my God, you're gorgeous. How is my brother dating someone this gorgeous?" "Anna." Ethan groaned, but Victoria laughed, extending her hand. "You must be Anna. I've heard so much about you." "All lies, I'm sure," Anna said, pulling Victoria into a hug instead of shaking her hand. "Welcome to the family. Fair warning, we're all huggers and criers, and we talk too much." "Sounds perfect," Victoria said, and meant it. The new house was a symphony of activity. Movers tramped up and down stairs, Sophie directed traffic with the authority of a tiny general, and Anna had taken charge of the kitchen, unwrapping dishes and putting them away while keeping up a steady stream of commentary about Ethan's bachelor years. "You should have seen his first apartment," Anna was telling Victoria as they unpacked. "He had exactly 1 fork, 1 knife, and 1 spoon. Said it was efficient." "I was 22, Ethan defended from across the room, where he was assembling Sophie's new bookshelf. "You were pathetic," Anna corrected cheerfully. "Thank God Victoria's here to civilize you." By afternoon, the major furniture was in place, and they'd sent the movers away with generous tips. Anna had reluctantly left for a previous engagement, but not before making Victoria promise to have lunch next week. "Just us girls, so I can tell you all Ethan's embarrassing childhood stories." The 3 of them stood in their new living room surrounded by boxes, but together. Sophie was arranging and rearranging her stuffed animals on the couch, determining the optimal configuration. Victoria was unpacking books, occasionally reading titles aloud that made Ethan laugh. And Ethan was hanging pictures, starting with the one from the market, their first family photo. "A little to the left," Victoria directed. "No, too much." Back to the right. Perfect. You said that 3 moves ago, Ethan pointed out. I was wrong then. Now it's perfect. Sophie looked up from her animals. Everything's perfect. We have a home. The simplicity of her statement, the pure joy in it, made both adults stop what they were doing. Victoria crossed to where Sophie sat, settling beside her on the floor among the stuffed animals. We do have a home, Victoria agreed. Our very first home together. Forever home, Sophie corrected. That's what they call it when animals get adopted and they never have to leave again. This is our forever home. That evening, too tired to cook, they ordered Chinese food and ate it sitting on the floor of the living room, using boxes as tables. Sophie fell asleep against Victoria's shoulder, exhausted from the excitement, and they carried her up to her new room together, tucking her into the bed they'd assembled first, making sure she'd have a comfortable place to sleep. She's out cold, Ethan whispered, brushing hair from Sophie's forehead. It's been a big day, Victoria whispered back. For all of us. They stood there for a moment, watching Sophie sleep in her new room with its bigger windows and the reading nook she'd already filled with books and pillows. Then they quietly made their way to their own room, their room not his or hers, but theirs. Boxes were stacked against one wall, and they hadn't hung curtains yet, but the bed was made with new sheets Victoria had insisted on buying. We're not starting our new life with your bachelor sheets, Ethan, and moonlight streamed through the windows, painting everything in silver. We did it, Victoria said, a note of wonder in her voice. We actually did it. Having second thoughts? Ethan asked, pulling her close. Never. Not for a second. She looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I never thought I'd have this again? A home, a family, someone to unpack boxes with and argue about picture placement and eat takeout on the floor with. I never thought I'd trust anyone enough to let them in like this, Ethan admitted. After Rachel, I built walls so high I couldn't see over them. But you didn't climb the walls. You just gently took them apart brick by brick until I couldn't remember why I'd built them in the first place. They kissed then, soft and deep, a promise and a celebration all at once. When they pulled apart, Victoria was smiling the smile he'd come to think of as the one she saved just for him, soft and unguarded and real. We should probably unpack more boxes, she said without much conviction. Or, Ethan suggested, we could christen our new home properly. Victoria laughed, pulling him toward the bed. The boxes can wait. The next morning arrived with Sophie jumping on their bed, something she'd never been able to do in the old house, where Ethan's room had felt off-limits somehow. But here, in this new space they'd claimed together, she bounded in like sunshine itself. It's our first morning in the new house, she announced. We need to make special breakfast, Victoria groaned, pulling a pillow over her head. It's so early, sweetheart. It's 7:30, Sophie informed them. That's not early, that's regular. She has a point, Ethan said, earning himself a gentle smack from Victoria with the pillow. Whose side are you on? The side of special breakfast, he said, catching the pillow and tossing it aside. Come on, sleepyhead. Sophie's right. First morning deserves something special. They made pancakes successfully this time, with Victoria manning the griddle, while Ethan mixed batter and Sophie set the table with the dishes Anna had unpacked. The kitchen was flooded with morning light and boxes still crowded the corners, but it felt like home already, maybe because home was less about the space and more about the people in it. We should make a tradition, Sophie suggested through a mouthful of pancake. Every Sunday special breakfast in our new house. Every Sunday? Victoria asked. That's a lot of special breakfasts. That's the point, Sophie said with 8-year-old logic. If we do it every week, we'll have hundreds of special breakfasts. Thousands even. Ethan met Victoria's eyes across the table, seeing his own thoughts reflected there. Thousands of breakfasts meant years and years together. Meant growing old in this house. Meant watching Sophie grow up, and maybe, just maybe, welcoming other children to this table someday. Thousands of special breakfasts it is, Victoria agreed, reaching over to wipe syrup from Sophie's chin. The doorbell rang just as they were finishing cleanup. Sophie ran to answer it, returning with an enormous bouquet of flowers, and a delivery man who looked amused by her enthusiasm. Delivery for the Ward Hale family, he said, and Ethan felt Victoria's quick intake of breath at the hyphenated name. The card was from Victoria's parents. Welcome home, darling. We can't wait to see what you three build together. All our love, Mom and Dad. P.S. Your father is already planning what he'll teach Sophie about fishing when we visit. Your parents are coming to visit, Sophie asked excitedly. When soon? Next month, Victoria confirmed. Is that okay with you? More grandparents. Sophie cheered, then paused. Wait, what do I call them? Victoria knelt down to Sophie's level. Whatever feels comfortable to you, sweetheart. You could call them by their names, Patricia and Robert, or can I call them Grandma and Grandpa? Sophie interrupted. I mean, if you're going to be my mom eventually, then they'd be my grandparents, right? Victoria's eyes filled with tears. They would love that, Sophie. They would love that so much. The rest of the day was spent in a blur of unpacking, organizing, and slowly transforming the house into their home. Neighbors stopped by to introduce themselves, bringing cookies and casseroles and welcoming smiles. The Johnsons from next door had a daughter Sophie's age named Emma, and within minutes the two girls were planning sleepovers and shared adventures. She seems nice, Mrs. Johnson said, watching the girls play in the backyard while the adults chatted on the porch. It's good for Emma to have a friend so close by. Sophie's been hoping for a neighbor friend, Ethan said. This is perfect. We heard you're newly moved in together, Mr. Johnson said, carefully. Clearly fishing for information, but trying to be polite about it. We are, Victoria said, simply taking Ethan's hand. It's a big step, but it felt right. The best things usually do, Mrs. Johnson said warmly. We've been married 23 years, and I still remember how scared and excited we were when we first moved in together. That mix of what are we doing and this is exactly right. That's exactly how it feels, Victoria admitted, and Ethan squeezed her hand, loving her for her honesty, for not putting up the CEO facade with these strangers who might become friends. As the sun began to set on their first full day in the new house, they sat on the back porch watching Sophie and Emma chase fireflies, their laughter echoing across the yard. Victoria had changed into one of Ethan's t-shirts and shorts, her feet bare, her hair pulled back messily. She looked nothing like the polished executive who commanded boardrooms and million-dollar deals. She looked like a woman at home at peace and love. Penny for your thoughts, Ethan said, noticing her distant expression. I was thinking about time, she said. How a year ago I was alone in my apartment working until midnight every night telling myself I was fulfilled. And now I'm watching our daughter catch fireflies in our backyard while wearing your shirt, and I can't imagine being anywhere else. Our daughter? Ethan repeated softly. Victoria's eyes widened. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to presume. No, Ethan interrupted. Don't apologize. She is our daughter in every way that matters. Has been for a while now. But legally, we'll figure that out, Ethan said firmly. When we're ready. When we make things official. But Victoria, you're her mother now, biology and legalities aside. You're the one she runs to with good news and bad dreams. You're the one teaching her to be strong and smart and kind. You're her mom. Victoria was crying now, not trying to hide it. I never thought I'd get to be anyone's mom. You're Sophie's mom, and maybe, Ethan paused, gathering courage. Maybe someday you'll be other children's mom too, if you want. Victoria turned to look at him fully. You'd want that more children. With you. Yes, a dozen of them. Let's start with one more and see how we do. Victoria laughed through her tears. Deal. But first, Ethan said, pulling something from his pocket, we need to make some other things official. Victoria gasped as he slid off the porch bench and onto one knee, producing a small velvet box. Inside was the ring James's parents had sent, the one that represented blessing and continuity and love that transformed rather than died. Victoria Hale. Ethan began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. 6 months ago, you were my boss, my terrifying, brilliant, untouchable boss. Then one night, you were just a woman who needed a ride home, who needed someone to see past the armor to the person underneath. That drive changed everything. You've brought light back into our lives, love back into our home, laughter back into our days. You've become Sophie's mother and my partner and the person I can't imagine living without. Sophie must have noticed something because suddenly she was there, Emma forgotten standing beside them with wide eyes and clasped hands. "Are you proposing?" she whispered loudly. "For real?" "I'm trying to," Ethan said with a laugh. "If you'll let me finish. Keep going," Sophie urged, then clamped her hands over her mouth. Ethan looked back at Victoria, who was laughing and crying simultaneously. "Victoria, will you marry me? Will you officially become Sophie's mom and my wife and make this beautiful, chaotic, perfect life we're building legal and permanent and forever?" "Yes," Victoria said, not even hesitating. "Yes to all of it. Yes forever." As Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, a perfect fit as if it had been waiting for this moment, for this hand, for this love, Sophie erupted in cheers, throwing herself at them both. "We're getting married!" She shouted to Emma, to the Johnsons who had come out to see what the commotion was about, to the fireflies and the setting sun, and anyone else who might be listening. "We're going to be a real family." "We're already a real family," Victoria corrected, pulling Sophie close. "Now we're just making it official." The neighbors offered congratulations. Emma and Sophie immediately began planning their roles in the wedding, and somewhere in the chaos, Victoria and Ethan found a moment to kiss, to seal this promise properly. "I love you," Victoria whispered against his lips. "Thank you for being brave that night. Thank you for offering to drive me home. Thank you for saying yes," Ethan whispered back. Then and now. As darkness fell properly, they all went inside their new home. Sophie still chattering excitedly about flower girl dresses and wedding cakes, Victoria calling her parents to share the news, Ethan watching them both with a contentment so profound it made his chest ache. The house was still full of boxes. They'd eaten takeout on the floor just last night. There were 1,000 decisions to make about paint colors and furniture placement and whether the dining room should be formal or casual. But none of that mattered compared to this. Sophie curled between them on the couch, Victoria's ring catching the lamplight, all three of them exactly where they belonged. "Tell me the story," Sophie requested, her traditional bedtime request taking on new meaning now. "What story, sweetheart?" Victoria asked, though they all knew which one. "The story of us, of how we became a family." Ethan began as he always did. "Once upon a time, there was a little girl and her dad who thought they had everything they needed, but they were wrong," Sophie chimed in, knowing her part. "They were missing someone." Victoria continued, having learned the rhythm of this story over many tellings. "Someone who was also missing them," Ethan added. "And one night," Sophie said, her voice getting sleepy, "Dad was brave and kind, and Victoria was sad and needed a friend," Victoria said softly, and a simple ride home changed everything. They finished together. Sophie was asleep before they could add the new chapter, the proposal, the yes, the promise of forever. But there would be time for that, Ethan thought. Time for new chapters and new stories for the wedding Sophie was already planning in her head for the siblings they might give her for the years of special Sunday breakfasts and caught fireflies and bedtime stories. "We should put her to bed," Victoria whispered, but neither of them moved, content to sit with Sophie between them, their newly formed constellation complete. "In a minute," Ethan said, pressing a kiss to Victoria's temple. "Let's just stay like this for a minute." But a minute turned into an hour, and eventually they carried Sophie up to bed together, tucking her in with kisses and whispered promises of tomorrow's adventures. Then they stood in the doorway of her room, watching her sleep, this child, who had brought them together, who had opened her heart to a bonus mom, who became just mom, who showed them both that families could be built from choice and chance and courage. "No regrets?" Ethan asked as they finally made their way to their own room. "Only one?" Victoria said, and Ethan's heart skipped until she continued. "I wish I'd been brave enough to get drunk at a company party sooner." He laughed, pulling her close. "Everything happened exactly when it was supposed to." "You really believe that?" "I do. We both had to be ready. I had to be ready to let someone in, you had to be ready to let your guard down, and Sophie had to be ready for a mom who chose her. And now we're ready for everything else. The wedding, the future, the thousands of Sunday breakfasts Sophie promised. The dozen children you mentioned," Victoria teased. "Let's see how we do with one more first," Ethan said, echoing her earlier words. They stood together in their new bedroom in their new house, with their new engagement making everything feel electric with possibility. Outside fireflies still danced in the darkness, and somewhere an owl called and the suburbs settled into sleep around them. But inside in this space they'd claimed as theirs, the future stretched bright and beautiful, full of promises kept and dreams realized. "I love you," Victoria said, the words still feeling new and precious on her tongue. "I love you too," Ethan replied. "Both of you, all of us. This family we've made. This family we've chosen," Victoria corrected. And that was the truth of it. They'd chosen each other on a dark night months ago when Ethan offered a ride and Victoria accepted. They'd chosen each other every day since, through burnt pancakes and bedtime stories, through corporate complications and custody conversations they'd need to have soon. They'd chosen to risk their hearts after loss had taught them to be careful, chosen hope over fear, love over loneliness. And tomorrow, they'd choose each other again. And the day after that. And all the days that followed, through wedding planning and house decorating, through Sophie's school plays and soccer games, through the adoption process they'd eventually navigate to make Victoria legally what she already was in every way that mattered, Sophie's mother. The clock on the nightstand ticked past midnight, officially making it Monday, the start of a new week in their new home with their newly official engagement. Victoria was already asleep beside him, her hand with its antique ring resting on his chest, her breathing deep and even. But Ethan lay awake a bit longer, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the new house, learning its rhythms, its creaks and sighs. He thought about the morning, how they'd wake up engaged, how Sophie would probably announce it to everyone at school, how Victoria would wear her ring to the office and face down any whispers with the steel spine that made her a formidable CEO and an even more formidable mother. He thought about calling his parents, about Victoria's parents visiting, about merging not just their lives, but their families, creating something bigger and richer than any of them had alone. But mostly he thought about that drive, the one that started everything, how he'd simply been trying to be kind to help someone who needed it, how Victoria had been at her lowest point, ready to give up on the possibility of family, of love, of anything beyond corporate success, how Sophie had been resigned to their family of two, not knowing she was missing a mother who would love her fiercely and completely. 3 broken pieces that turned out to be not broken at all, just waiting to find each other, to fit together, to create something whole and beautiful and strong. A family not of circumstance but of choice, a love not of convenience but of recognition, 2 souls seeing past the surface to the truth beneath. Ethan finally drifted off to sleep with Victoria warm beside him, and Sophie safe down the hall in their new house that would become their home in the life they were building day by day, choice by choice, love by love. And somewhere in his dreams he was driving through the city at night, but this time Victoria was beside him by choice, Sophie in the back seat, all of them heading not away from something, but toward it, toward home, toward family, toward the future they'd create together. The alarm would ring in a few hours, starting their first full week in the new house. There would be breakfast to make and lunches to pack, meetings to attend, and homework to help with, wedding plans to discuss, and a life to build. It would be chaotic and imperfect and absolutely perfect in its imperfection. But for now, in the deep quiet of night, they slept the single dad who'd learned to love again, the lonely boss who'd found her family, and the little girl who'd gotten the mom she'd wished for on countless stars. 3 hearts beating in 3 different rooms of the same house, connected by invisible threads of love that would only grow stronger with time. The morning sun cast long shadows through the kitchen windows as Victoria stood at the counter, her engagement ring catching the light as she poured coffee. It had been 2 weeks since the proposal, and she still found herself staring at the ring, sometimes amazed by its weight on her finger and everything it represented. "You're doing it again," Ethan observed, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Doing what?" "Looking at your ring like you can't believe it's real." "Sometimes I can't," she admitted, leaning back into his embrace. 3 weeks in this house, 2 weeks engaged, and every morning I wake up expecting it to be a dream." "Not a dream," he assured her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Though we might be living in a construction zone." He wasn't wrong. The house was still in transition, with paint samples taped to walls and furniture arrangements that changed daily as they figured out what worked. Sophie had taken to leaving helpful suggestions written in crayon on sticky notes. Couch should face TV better, and need more shelves for books, and paint my room purple. Please, please, please. Speaking of which, Victoria said, turning in his arms, the contractor's coming today to look at the bathroom renovation. And we have Sophie's parent-teacher conference at 3, and dinner with your parents at 6. And somewhere in there we both have to actually work, Ethan added with a laugh. I've been thinking about that, Victoria said carefully. About work. About us working together while being engaged. Ethan's expression grew serious. Are you having second thoughts about the partnership? No, God, no. You've earned that 10 times over. I'm thinking about perception, about making sure everyone knows this is legitimate, that your success isn't because of us. Let them think what they want. Ethan. Her CEO voice slipped through the one that commanded boardrooms. I need to protect both of us. I'm proposing we bring in an external consultant to review the partnership terms to validate your contributions independently. It's not about us. It's about the company, about doing this right. He studied her face, seeing the executive who'd built an empire wrestling with the woman who wanted to protect their personal life. If that's what you think is best, I do. And there's something else. She took a breath. I want to step back a little, not from the company, but from the day-to-day operations. Promote Jennifer to COO. Let her handle more while I focus on strategy and major clients and family. Victoria, you love the daily operations. I love you and Sophie more, she said simply. I've spent 15 years putting work first. I don't want to miss Sophie's plays because of board meetings. I don't want to be checking emails during our honeymoon. I want to be present for this life we're building. Before Ethan could respond, Sophie thundered down the stairs, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. I'm ready for school. Did you remember it's Share Day? I'm bringing the photo from the market to share about our family. We remembered, Victoria assured her, though in truth she'd forgotten until Sophie's reminder. This was still new, this juggling of corporate responsibilities with school schedules and share days. Emma's mom is bringing cupcakes for the class, Sophie continued, grabbing her lunchbox. Can we bring something next time? Of course, Victoria said. What would you like to bring? Your homemade brownies, the lopsided ones. Victoria laughed. They're only lopsided because I'm still learning. That's what makes them special, Sophie said with 8-year-old wisdom. They're made with love and trying. The doorbell rang before anyone could respond, and Sophie ran to answer it, returning with Anna, who'd taken to dropping by unannounced since the engagement. Morning, future sister-in-law, Anna sang out, helping herself to coffee. Ready for Mom and Dad tonight. Define ready, Ethan muttered. They're going to cry, Anna warned Victoria. Fair warning, Dad hasn't seen Ethan this happy since, well, ever. And Mom's already bought 3 different grandmother books, even though Sophie calls her Nana Anna. But I'm not even their grandchild yet, Sophie protested. Anna knelt down to Sophie's level. Sweetheart, you became their grandchild the moment Uncle Ethan decided Victoria was family. Legal stuff is just paperwork. So I have lots of grandparents now. So many grandparents, Anna confirmed. You're going to be spoiled rotten. Excellent, Sophie declared, making all the adults laugh. After Sophie got on the school bus and Anna left for work, Victoria and Ethan stood in their still chaotic living room surrounded by paint samples and fabric swatches and the beautiful mess of building a life together. We need to make some decisions, Victoria said, picking up a stack of purple paint samples Sophie had specifically selected. Purple it is, Ethan said without hesitation. You didn't even look at them. Don't need to. She wants purple, she gets purple. Besides, he pulled Victoria closer. We have bigger decisions to make, like when to get married. Sophie votes for tomorrow, Victoria laughed. She informed me yesterday that waiting is boring for grown-ups. What do you vote for? Victoria considered. Fall. October, maybe. The leaves will be beautiful. Sophie will be settled in school, and it gives us time to do this right. October it is. Big wedding or small? Small, Victoria said immediately. Family, close friends. Maybe in the backyard once we get it landscaped. I love that idea, though Sophie might have opinions about everything. they said in unison, laughing. The contractor arrived then, a middle-aged man named Tony, who looked at their bathroom plans with the eye of someone who'd seen too many HGTV-inspired disasters. "You sure you want to knock out this wall, us?" he asked, tapping the blueprint. "We need more space," Victoria explained. "Eventually we might have more children, and one bathroom upstairs won't be enough." Tony's eyebrows rose slightly at "more children," but he just nodded. "Makes sense. When you're thinking about starting the renovation," Ethan asked. "The kids," Tony said with a grin. Victoria and Ethan exchanged glances. It was a conversation they'd been dancing around since the engagement, both wanting it, but unsure how to navigate the practicalities. "Soon," Victoria said softly. "After the wedding." "Well, then, we better get this bathroom done quick," Tony said, making notes. "These things take time, and trust me, pregnancy and renovation don't mix. My wife nearly murdered me when I was retiling our bathroom while she was 8 months pregnant." After Tony left with promises to send a quote, Victoria stood in what would become their expanded master bathroom, imagining the space filled with the chaos of multiple children during bath time. "You really want more kids?" Ethan asked from the doorway. "I want your kids," she corrected. "I want Sophie to have siblings. I want our house full of laughter and chaos, and too many shoes by the door. Even though Sophie's already 8, the age gap." "Will be perfect," Victoria interrupted. "She'll be the amazing big sister who helps and teaches and probably bosses them around mercilessly." "You've thought about this?" "Every night since you mentioned it. I'm 38, Ethan. If we're doing this, we can't wait too long." He crossed to her, taking her hands. "Then we won't wait. October wedding, and then we see what happens," Victoria finished. The parent-teacher conference that afternoon was their first as an engaged couple, and Mrs. Patterson couldn't hide her delight. "Sophie's been writing stories about your family all semester," she said, pulling out a folder full of Sophie's work. "Look at this one from last week." The story was titled "My Three Parents" and began, "I have a dad who fixes everything, a mom in heaven who sent me Victoria, and a bonus mom who's going to be my real mom soon." Victoria's breath caught. She thinks her birth mother is in heaven. Mrs. Patterson looked surprised. "You didn't know Sophie's been telling everyone her first mom went to heaven when she was little, but sent Victoria to take care of her and her dad." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Rachel wasn't dead. She was living in California with her new husband, having signed away her parental rights when Sophie was 2. They'd agreed to tell Sophie the truth when she was older, but apparently she'd created her own narrative. "We need to talk to her," Victoria said quietly. "She's doing wonderfully academically." Mrs. Patterson continued, sensing the shift in mood. "Her reading is above grade level, and her emotional intelligence is remarkable. She's been helping the younger kids at recess, very nurturing." "She's practicing being a big sister," Ethan explained. "We're hoping to expand our family." Mrs. Patterson beamed. "She'll be wonderful. She has such a capacity for love." As they left the school, Victoria was quiet, processing the revelation about Sophie's story. "We should tell her the truth," she said finally. "About Rachel. It'll hurt her. Lies hurt worse in the long run. Besides," Victoria stopped walking, turning to face him. "She needs to know that Rachel chose to leave and I'm choosing to stay. That's important." "You're right," Ethan agreed. "But after dinner with my parents, one emotional conversation at a time." The dinner was exactly as Anna had predicted. Ethan's father, Robert, teared up the moment he saw Victoria's ring, and his mother, Linda, had Sophie on her lap within minutes, listening intently as Sophie described their wedding plans. "Purple flowers everywhere," Sophie was saying, "and I'll be the flower girl and ring bearer because I'm very responsible." "You are very responsible," Linda agreed, "and you'll be the most beautiful flower girl ever." "Victoria's going to be the most beautiful," Sophie corrected loyally. "Dad says she takes his breath away." "Did he now?" Robert asked, grinning at his son's reddening face. "He did. He also says she makes him want to sing, but I've heard Dad sing, and it's terrible, so maybe that's not a good thing." The table erupted in laughter, and Ethan buried his face in his hands while Victoria rubbed his back, trying not to laugh too hard. "I think it's wonderful," Linda said, reaching across the table to squeeze Victoria's hand. "We've been hoping Ethan would find someone who could make him sing again, terrible voice and all." "Mom," Ethan protested. What? It's true. After Rachel, Linda caught herself glancing at Sophie. After my first mom went to heaven, Sophie supplied helpfully, and the adults all froze. Sweetheart, Ethan started carefully about that. I know she's not really in heaven, Sophie interrupted, shocking them all. Emma's mom told Emma, who told me that my birth mom lives in California, but I like my story better. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria reached for Sophie, pulling her into her lap. Why do you like your story better? She asked gently. Sophie played with Victoria's engagement ring as she answered. Because in my story she loved me but had to leave. In the real story she chose to leave. That hurts more. Oh, baby. Ethan moved around the table, kneeling beside Victoria's chair so he was at Sophie's eye level. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that don't make sense. It wasn't about you. I know, Sophie said with a maturity beyond her years. Mrs. Johnson explained it to me. She said some people aren't meant to be parents, and it's better they figure that out and leave than stay and be unhappy. Mrs. Johnson sounds wise, Linda said softly. She is. She also said I'm lucky because I got Victoria instead, and Victoria chose me on purpose. Victoria was crying now, not even trying to hide it. I did choose you on purpose. Every single day I choose you. And you'll never leave. Never, Victoria promised. Even when you're a teenager and hate me for not letting you stay out late. I won't hate you, Sophie said confidently. I'll probably be mad sometimes, but I won't hate you. Can we put that in writing? Robert joked, breaking the tension. The rest of dinner was lighter, with Linda pulling out embarrassing photos of Ethan as a child and Robert telling stories about Ethan's first attempts at dating. He once brought a girl home, Robert was saying, and he was so nervous he walked straight into the glass door. Dad, please, Ethan groaned. The door was clean, Robert defended. And the girl thought it was charming, said it showed he was human. What happened to her? Victoria asked, enjoying Ethan's discomfort. She married his best friend from college, Anna supplied cheerfully. They sent a wedding invitation and everything. And that's enough family history for tonight, Ethan declared, starting to clear plates. Later. After his parents had left and Sophie was in bed, Victoria and Ethan sat on the porch, despite the evening chill, processing the revelations of the day. She knew, Ethan said, still amazed. This whole time she knew about Rachel. Children know more than we think they do. They just process it differently. Are you okay? With what she said about choosing you, Victoria leaned against his shoulder. I'm more than okay. She's right, I did choose her. Choose both of you. It wasn't obligation or circumstance. It was choice, deliberate and conscious. And you keep choosing us. Every day. Though some days the choice is easier than others, like when you don't walk into glass doors. That was one time. According to your father, it was at least 3 times. I'm never living that down, am I? Never, Victoria confirmed cheerfully. I'm going to tell that story at our wedding. You wouldn't. Reception speech, I knew Ethan was the one when he managed to drive me home without hitting any glass doors. He tackled her gently, both of them laughing as they mock wrestled on the porch swing, acting more like teenagers than responsible adults with a mortgage and a child. Get a room, Mrs. Johnson called out from next door where she was taking out trash. We have a whole house, Ethan called back. Then use it, she replied. But she was laughing. They went inside, still giggling like kids, and found Sophie standing at the top of the stairs in her pajamas. You woke me up with your laughing, she accused, but she was smiling. Sorry, sweetheart, Victoria said, climbing the stairs to pick her up, even though Sophie was getting almost too big for it. It's okay. I like hearing you laugh, both of you. She yawned enormously. Will you both tuck me in? Always, Ethan promised. They tucked her in together. Sophie insisting on kisses from both of them. Then her stuffed elephant also needed kisses. Then she needed one more sip of water. Then one more hug. You're stalling, Victoria observed. Maybe a little, Sophie admitted. But also I just like having you both here. We like being here, Ethan assured her. Even when I'm a teenager and difficult. Especially then, Victoria said. That's when you'll need us most, even if you don't think so. Emma's older sister is 13 and she's awful, Sophie informed them. She slams doors and everything. We'll handle door slamming, Ethan promised. We're tough. Victoria's tougher, Sophie said matter-of-factly. She runs a whole company. Teenage me won't stand a chance. Go to sleep, you little negotiator, Victoria laughed, kissing her forehead one more time. As they closed Sophie's door, they could hear her talking to her elephant, explaining the wedding plans in detail. And we'll all have matching flowers. Mr. Elephant, even you. In their own bedroom, as they got ready for bed, Victoria said, We're really doing this, the whole thing. Marriage, more kids, PTA meetings, teenage years. Having second thoughts. Never, just amazed. 6 months ago, if someone had told me I'd be living in the suburbs engaged planning a wedding with an 8-year-old as my creative director, I would have thought they were insane. And now I can't imagine any other life. She paused in brushing her hair. Your parents were wonderful tonight. They love you. Dad pulled me aside and said you're the best thing that ever happened to me. He's biased. He's right, Ethan corrected. You and Sophie are the best things in my life. Sophie was already in your life. But she's different now. Happier, more complete. You didn't just give me love, Victoria. You gave Sophie a mother, a real mother who chose her. She gave me purpose beyond profit margins, Victoria said softly. Both of you did. They settled into bed, Victoria automatically curling into Ethan's side, his arm around her shoulders. The house creaked softly around them, settling for the night, and somewhere a dog barked in the distance. October feels far away, Victoria said into the darkness. 3 months. I don't want to wait 3 months to be your wife. Ethan was quiet for a moment. So let's not wait. What? Let's get married sooner, next month. Sophie can still have her purple flowers. We'll still have family there, but why wait? Victoria sat up, looking down at him in the dim light from the street lamp outside. You're serious? Completely. We could do it Labor Day weekend. Everyone will already be off work. That's in 3 weeks. So we have a house, we have the backyard, we have Sophie as our wedding planner. What else do we need? A dress for starters. You'd be beautiful in a paper bag. I'm not getting married in a paper bag, Ethan. But you are getting married in 3 weeks. Victoria looked at her ring, then at Ethan, then toward the door where they could hear Sophie still murmuring to her elephant about flower arrangements. Yes, she said, surprising herself. Yes, let's do it. Labor Day weekend. Really? Really? But I'm not wearing a paper bag. Deal! Ethan laughed, pulling her down for a kiss. Sophie's going to lose her mind with excitement, Victoria warned. She's going to want to plan everything. Let her. 8-year-old wedding planner might be exactly what we need. Purple everything. Purple everything, Victoria agreed. They kissed again deeper this time, full of promise and excitement and the thrill of a decision made from love rather than logic. 3 weeks to plan a wedding. 3 weeks until Victoria became Mrs. Ward. 3 weeks until their family became official in the eyes of the law. Though in their hearts, it had been official since that first Saturday morning when Victoria stayed for breakfast and never really left. I love you, Ethan whispered against her lips. I love you too. Both of you. All of us. Outside the suburban street was quiet houses dark, except for porch lights standing sentinel against the night. But inside the Ward's soon-to-be official home, hearts were full of plans and promises, dreams taking shape in the darkness. Tomorrow they'd tell Sophie about the moved-up wedding date. She'd shriek with joy, immediately start revising her flower arrangements, and probably insist on going dress shopping immediately. Anna would panic about the shortened timeline, then kick into high gear as maid of honor. Both sets of parents would be thrilled and offer to help with everything. There would be 1,000 details to manage in 3 weeks, catering and flowers and getting a marriage license and figuring out how to fit everyone in their backyard. Victoria would have to find a dress Ethan would need, a suit. Sophie would require the perfect flower girl outfit that met her exacting standards. But tonight, in the quiet of their bedroom with Sophie safe down the hall, and their engagement official, and their wedding suddenly imminent, everything felt possible. Every dream, every hope, every plan for their future felt not just possible but inevitable, as certain as the sunrise that would come in just a few hours. 3 weeks, Victoria murmured, already half asleep. 3 weeks, Ethan confirmed, holding her closer. Down the hall, Sophie had finally stopped talking to her elephant, lost in dreams of purple flowers and wedding cake. The house settled into deeper quiet, just the sound of breathing and the occasional creak of a house learning to hold a family's worth of love. 3 weeks until the wedding. A lifetime of choices had led them here. Ethan's choice to offer a ride, Victoria's choice to accept it, Sophie's choice to open her heart to a bonus mom, and 1,000 smaller choices since then. Each one building on the last, creating something stronger than any of them alone. The alarm clock on the nightstand ticked steadily toward morning, toward the moment when they'd share their news with Sophie, toward the beginning of 3 weeks of joyful chaos that would culminate in a backyard wedding with purple flowers and an 8-year-old wedding planner's vision brought to life. But for now, they slept the family that had found each other against all odds, the family that chose each other every day. The family that in 3 weeks would make it official, but had been real since the moment Victoria first stayed for breakfast. And Ethan realized he'd been waiting for her all along. The next morning arrived with Sophie bouncing on their bed at dawn, her elephant clutched in one hand and a notebook in the other. "I had the best dream about the wedding," she announced, not bothering with good morning. "There were purple butterflies everywhere, and we all wore matching shoes, and the cake was as tall as me," Victoria groaned, pulling a pillow over her head. "Sophie, sweetheart, the sun isn't even up yet." "But wedding planning doesn't sleep," Sophie said seriously, a phrase she'd apparently picked up from a wedding show she'd watched with Emma. Ethan sat up, his hair sticking up at odd angles. "Actually, Soph, we have something to tell you about the wedding." Sophie's face fell. "You're not canceling it, are you? Because I already told everyone at school and Emma's mom is teaching me to do the electric slide for the reception." "No, baby, we're not canceling," Victoria said, sitting up and pulling Sophie between them. "We're moving it up." Sophie's eyes widened. "Sooner? How much sooner?" 3 weeks, Ethan said, bracing for the explosion. The shriek that followed probably woke the entire neighborhood. Sophie launched herself at them. Notebook Flying Elephant abandoned her small arms, trying to embrace them both at once. 3 weeks. 3 weeks. That's like, she counted on her fingers. 21 days. We have to go dress shopping today and taste cakes and pick flowers and breathe, sweetheart, Victoria laughed, catching Sophie's flailing hands. We have time. Time? We have no time. 3 weeks is nothing. Aunt Anna said planning a wedding takes at least 6 months, and she doesn't even have a boyfriend. We don't need a big complicated wedding, Ethan explained. Just family and close friends in our backyard. Sophie considered this, her 8-year-old mind clearly running through possibilities. Okay, but I have conditions. Conditions? Victoria asked, amused. Yes. First, I still get purple flowers. Second, the cake has to be chocolate inside, even if it's white outside. Third, I get to help pick your dress. Fourth, how many conditions are there? Ethan interrupted. Sophie consulted her notebook, which she'd retrieved from the floor. 17, but some are negotiable. 17 wedding conditions from an 8-year-old, Victoria mused. Is this what my life has become? Your best life, Sophie said confidently. Now, about the dress shopping. By the time they made it downstairs for breakfast, Sophie had called Anna, waking her, texted Emma from Victoria's phone with permission, and started a list titled Urgent Wedding Stuff that was already 2 pages long. We need a wedding coordinator, she announced over cereal. Emma's sister's friend's mom planned a wedding in 2 weeks, and she said the secret is delegation. Where are you learning these words? Ethan asked. Wedding YouTube, very educational. Victoria's phone rang, her mother, Patricia, calling from Florida. Darling, Anna just called. 3 weeks. Have you lost your minds? Possibly, Victoria admitted, putting the phone on speaker. But we don't want to wait, Mom. Then we're flying up immediately, today. Robert's already looking at flights. Mom, you don't have to. Victoria Hale, you're my only daughter, and you're getting married in 3 weeks. We're coming. We'll stay at a hotel, but we're coming. Sophie grabbed the phone. Grandma Patricia, we need purple flowers and chocolate cake, and Victoria needs a dress that makes Dad cry, but in a good way. Patricia's laughter filled the kitchen. Sophie, darling, you're absolutely right. We'll be there by dinner. Tell your dad to order pizza we have planning to do. The day became a whirlwind. Anna arrived by 9, armed with bridal magazines and her laptop. 3 weeks, she kept muttering. 3 weeks. Have you people lost your minds? Yes, Victoria and Ethan said in unison. Good. Sanity is overrated. Sophie, you're with me. We're making spreadsheets. I love spreadsheets, Sophie exclaimed, which made Victoria inexplicably proud. The doorbell rang constantly. Mrs. Johnson with offers to help with flowers. She had a cousin who was a florist. Emma and her mother with cake recommendations. Even Tony the contractor who'd heard through the neighborhood grapevine and offered to expedite the bathroom renovation as a wedding gift. This is insane, Victoria said, standing in the middle of their living room, which had transformed into Wedding Central. Sophie and Anna had commandeered the dining table with their planning materials. Ethan was on the phone with the catering company, and Patricia and Robert had just arrived immediately, taking over flower arrangements. It's perfect, Robert, Victoria's father, corrected, hugging his daughter. Organized chaos just like the best families. Dad, I haven't seen you in 3 months, and you show up for emergency wedding planning. We'd show up for anything, sweetheart, but emergency wedding planning for our daughter, who we thought would never get married again. We'd fly to the moon for that. Robert made a Pinterest board on the plane, Patricia added. He's very proud of it. It has a purple theme, Robert said defensively. Sophie sent very specific instructions. The dress shopping expedition the next day was its own adventure. Victoria. Sophie, Anna, Patricia, and Mrs. Johnson. I'm basically family now. I know all your business. Descended on a bridal boutique that Anna had convinced to open early for them. 3 weeks, the consultant said faintly. You need a dress in 3 weeks. We need a perfect dress in 3 weeks, Sophie corrected. It has to make my dad cry, but happy cry, not sad cry. And it has to go with purple flowers. And it can't be too poofy because we're having the wedding in our backyard and there might be grass stains. The consultant looked at Victoria. Is she the bride or are you? Joint effort, Victoria said, already exhausted, and they'd only been there 10 minutes. But then on the 5th dress, magic happened. Victoria stepped out of the dressing room in a simple but elegant A-line dress with delicate lace details and a train that could be bustled for backyard navigation. Sophie gasped. That's it. That's the one. Dad's definitely going to cry. You think? Victoria asked, looking at herself in the mirror. She hardly recognized the woman looking back, radiant, happy. Nothing like the cold CEO she'd been 6 months ago. I know, Sophie said confidently. You look like a princess, but also like Victoria, but also like a mom. It's perfect. Patricia was crying, Anna was taking pictures, and Mrs. Johnson was fanning herself with a bridal magazine. We'll take it, Victoria said, not even asking the price. But it needs alterations. I'll pay rush fees, whatever it takes. Mom's using her CEO voice, Sophie stage whispered to Anna. That means business. The days blurred together in a haze of decisions and decorations. Ethan and Robert built an arbor in the backyard with Sophie as their supervisor, offering helpful suggestions like, it needs more purple, and what if we add twinkle lights? Twinkle lights it is, Robert agreed, having fallen completely under Sophie's spell. Victoria's parents had essentially moved in, taking over the guest room and throwing themselves into preparations with enthusiasm that surprised everyone, including Victoria. I've never seen them like this, Victoria told Ethan one evening watching Robert and Sophie string lights while Patricia arranged centerpieces. They were so reserved when I married James, proper. This is what happens when parents see their child truly happy, Linda said, joining them on the porch. She'd arrived that afternoon with homemade cookies and an offer to handle all the day of coordination. We can tell the difference between what we think you should want and what actually makes you glow. I'm glowing. Honey, you're practically radioactive with happiness, Linda laughed. And Sophie hasn't stopped smiling in 3 weeks. 2 weeks now, Ethan corrected. 2 weeks until the wedding. The invitation, Sophie suddenly yelled from the yard. We forgot to send invitations. We did send them, Anna called from inside. Email invitations, remember, very modern. But what about Great Aunt Ruth? She doesn't have email. I called her, Patricia assured her. She's coming and she's bringing her famous potato salad. I didn't know we had a Great Aunt Ruth, Victoria said. You don't, Patricia admitted. She's Robert's aunt. But Sophie's been calling us Grandma and Grandpa, so we figured Ruth is her great-aunt now, too. The casual expansion of family, the easy inclusion the way Sophie had become the center of everyone's universe. It was everything Victoria had dreamed of when she thought about children all those years ago before the losses taught her to stop dreaming. "You okay?" Ethan asked, noticing her eyes welling up. "More than okay, just overwhelmed." "Good, overwhelmed." Sophie ran over grass stains on her knees, purple marker on her hands from her endless list-making. "Dad, you need to practice your vows. Mom says you can't just wing it." "Mom says," Ethan repeated, and Victoria realized Sophie had switched from Victoria to Mom, without fanfare, without discussion, as naturally as breathing. "Yeah, Mom," Sophie said, then seemed to realize what she'd said. She looked at Victoria uncertainly. "Is that okay? Can I call you Mom now?" Even before the wedding. Victoria knelt down, not caring about the grass stains on her own knees. "You can call me whatever feels right, sweetheart. Mom Victoria Fee, Supreme Wedding Commander." "Mom," Sophie said firmly, "I want to call you Mom." She paused. "But maybe Supreme Wedding Commander for the next 2 weeks." Everyone laughed, and if a few tears were mixed in, nobody mentioned it. The bachelor-bachelorette party situation was, as Anna put it, complicated by the presence of an 8-year-old who refused to be left out of anything. "Traditional bachelor parties are stupid anyway," Sophie declared. "Why would Dad want to go to a strip club when he could have a family game night?" "How do you know about strip clubs?" Ethan asked, horrified. "Emma's sister. She knows everything inappropriate." So instead of separate parties, they had a combined celebration at the houseboard games, karaoke, where Ethan's terrible singing was confirmed and Sophie's masterful performance of the electric slide she'd been practicing. "This is the weirdest bachelor party ever," Ethan's college friend Mike said, watching Sophie teach Patricia how to do the Cupid shuffle. "It's perfect," Ethan corrected, watching Victoria laugh as Robert attempted to dance. "It's absolutely perfect." The week of the wedding, controlled chaos turned into barely controlled mayhem. The tent arrived a day early and had to be stored in the garage. The flowers were the wrong shade of purple, sending Sophie into a meltdown that required emergency ice cream and a promise from the florist to fix everything. "What if it rains?" Sophie asked for the 100th time, checking weather apps obsessively. "Then we'll dance in the rain," Victoria said, though she was checking the weather just as obsessively. "What if the cake falls? We'll eat cake off the ground. What if Dad forgets his vows?" "Then I'll make them up for him," Ethan said, catching Sophie in a hug. "Stop worrying, wedding planner. Everything's going to be perfect." "But what if—" "Sophie," Victoria's mom voiced gentle but firm. "What's really wrong?" Sophie was quiet for a moment, then in a small voice. "What if after you get married, things change? What if you love each other so much you forget about me?" Both Victoria and Ethan immediately wrapped Sophie in their arms, creating their signature family huddle. "Impossible," Victoria said firmly. "You're the reason we found each other. You're the heart of this family." "The whole wedding is basically for you," Ethan added. "Purple everything, remember?" "And," Victoria said, pulling back to look Sophie in the eyes, "in my vows, I'm not just promising to love Dad. I'm promising to love you too, forever and always." "Really? Really? I already wrote them. Want to read them?" "That's bad luck," Sophie gasped. "Only for Dad to see my dress. You can read my vows." They sat on Sophie's bed, Victoria pulling out her phone where she'd been drafting and redrafting her vows for days. Sophie read silently, her lips moving slightly, then threw herself at Victoria. "You wrote about the drive home, and the pancakes, and me." "Of course I did. You're both my love story." The rehearsal dinner the night before the wedding was held in the backyard, a test run for the next day's setup. The tent glowed with string lights, the tables were set with purple runners Sophie had picked out, and Great Aunt Ruth's potato salad was indeed famous worthy. "I'd like to make a toast," Robert Ethan's father said, standing with his beer. 6 months ago, my son was existing, going through the motions, being a great dad but forgetting to be Ethan. Then Victoria came along, and I watched my son come back to life. Victoria, thank you for saving him. He saved me first, Victoria said softly. You saved each other, Sophie piped up. That's what makes it a good story. To saving each other. Patricia toasted, and everyone raised their glasses, even Sophie with her juice box. Later, as tradition dictated, Victoria prepared to spend the night at Anna's apartment to avoid seeing Ethan before the wedding. Sophie was devastated. But we always sleep in the same house now. It's just one night, baby, Victoria assured her. And tomorrow it'll be official. We'll be a legal family. We're already a family, Sophie protested. You're right. Tomorrow we're just getting the paperwork to match what's already true. Like adoption papers, Sophie asked hopefully. Because Emma says after you marry Dad, you can adopt me, and then nobody can ever say you're not my real mom. Victoria looked at Ethan, who nodded. They'd already discussed this, already started the paperwork. Would you want that? Victoria asked carefully. For me to officially adopt you. More than anything, Sophie said solemnly. Then we'd all be Wards. The Ward family. Officially. Then, yes, we're working on adoption papers. Sophie's squeal of joy probably reached 3 blocks. Anna practically dragged Victoria out the door. Come on, bride, you need sleep. You're getting married tomorrow. I'm getting married tomorrow, Victoria repeated, dazed. To my brother, who's been texting me all day about how he can't wait to be your husband. It's disgusting and adorable. At Anna's apartment, Victoria found herself unable to sleep, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the journey that had brought her here. The company party where she'd drunk too much wine, trying to numb the pain of her losses. Ethan's gentle concern, his offer of a ride. The quiet drive through the city, Sophie's immediate acceptance. The slow build of love trust family. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Can't sleep. Sophie's in my bed asking if tomorrow is real. She's also dictating this message. She says to tell you she loves you, and she's already picked out which flowers she's throwing first. Victoria typed back, tell her I love her too, both of you, and tomorrow is very real, the realest thing ever. Another buzz. Sophie says the realist isn't proper grammar, but she'll allow it because tomorrow you're becoming her mom officially. Also, she's now asleep on my arm, and I can't move. Victoria smiled, picturing them in the bed that would tomorrow officially be hers too. Everything official tomorrow, though it had all been real for months now. Morning came too soon and not soon enough. Anna burst into the guest room at dawn with coffee and a manic energy that suggested she'd been up for hours. Wedding day? My brother's wedding day. Your wedding day. Sophie's already texted me 12 times about the flower schedule. Patricia and Linda arrived soon after, armed with makeup bags and curling irons, and the kind of determined enthusiasm that suggested resistance was futile. You're going to be the most beautiful bride, Patricia said, working on Victoria's hair, though Sophie might give you competition in her flower girl dress. It has 17 layers of tulle, Linda reported. I counted. She insisted on maximum poof. Of course she did, Victoria laughed. The dress fit perfectly, the alterations completed just in time. As Victoria stood in Anna's bedroom fully dressed, makeup done, hair pinned with purple flowers, at Sophie's insistence she hardly recognized herself. Gone was the cold CEO, the woman who'd built walls so high she'd forgotten what was on the other side. In her place stood a bride, a mother, a woman who'd learned that love wasn't about protecting yourself from loss, but about being brave enough to risk your heart again. Don't you dare cry and ruin your makeup, Anna warned, but she was crying too. The drive back to the house felt both endless and too quick. Victoria could see the tent and the backyard guests already gathering purple flowers everywhere Sophie's vision brought to life. Ready? Patricia asked as they pulled up. I've been ready since the first time Sophie called me Mom, Victoria said. They entered through the back gate to avoid Ethan seeing her. Sophie was waiting in the kitchen, resplendent in her purple dress with its 17 layers of tulle, a flower crown on her head, basket of purple petals clutched in her hands. Mom! She shrieked, then caught herself. Victoria, Mom is perfect, Victoria said, kneeling carefully in her dress to hug Sophie. You look absolutely beautiful, sweetheart. So do you... Dad's definitely going to cry. Good tears, though. He already cried twice this morning, and you weren't even there. The music started. A guitar player Anna had found playing something soft and romantic that Sophie had approved after extensive YouTube research. "That's our cue," Linda said, appearing in the doorway. "Sophie, you're up first." Sophie took a deep breath, suddenly serious. "I'm going to throw petals perfectly. I practiced." She walked out, and Victoria could hear the gathered guests cooing over her. Through the window, she could see Sophie's concentrated face as she distributed purple petals with scientific precision, then took her place at the front where Ethan waited. And Ethan, Victoria's breath caught. He was wearing the suit they'd picked out together, a purple boutonniere that matched Sophie's flowers, and an expression of such pure joy it made her heart race. When he saw her through the window, his face crumpled exactly as Sophie had predicted, happy tears flowing freely. "That's my cue," Victoria whispered. Robert appeared at her elbow. "May I have the honor? You want to walk me down the aisle, if you'll have me. Your mother and I might have missed your first wedding, but we're not missing this one." Victoria took his arm, and together they walked toward the tent, toward the guests who'd become family, toward Sophie, bouncing with excitement toward Ethan, who was openly crying now, not even trying to hide it. The walk felt both eternal and instant. She was aware of everything Mike recording on his phone. Great Aunt Ruth dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief, Mrs. Johnson giving a thumbs up, Emma waving enthusiastically, but mostly she was aware of Ethan's eyes on her, the way his whole face transformed with love. "Hi," she said when she reached him, the same thing she'd said that night in the car. "Hi," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "You look—" Sophie was right. "I'm definitely crying." "Good tears?" "The best tears." The ceremony was a blur. The officiant, a friend of Anna's with an online ordination and a purple tie for the occasion, spoke about second chances and chosen families. But Victoria barely heard him, too focused on Ethan's face, on Sophie standing between them, holding both their hands on this moment she'd never dared dream would come true. "The couple has written their own vows," the officiant announced. Ethan went first, pulling out a paper that was already wrinkled from nervous handling. "Victoria, 6 months ago, I offered you a ride home because it was the right thing to do. I had no idea that drive would lead us here, to this moment, to this family. You've taught me that love isn't about playing it safe. It's about being brave enough to let someone see all of you, the broken parts, the scared parts, the parts that sing badly in the shower." Everyone laughed, Sophie loudest of all. "You didn't just fall in love with me," Ethan continued. "You fell in love with Sophie, with our messy life, with burnt pancakes and bedtime stories and school plays where she's a tree. You chose us again and again, even when it would have been easier to maintain your safe, controlled life. You're the bravest person I know, and I promise to spend every day making sure you never regret that drive home." Victoria was crying now, not caring about her makeup. She pulled out her own vows, the ones Sophie had already read and approved. "Ethan and Sophie," she made sure to look at both of them, "because this is about both of you. That night you drove me home, I was at my lowest point. I'd given up on the idea of family, of children, of anything beyond professional success. But you saw through my armor to the person underneath, the person I'd forgotten existed. You gave me Sophie, who taught me that being a mother isn't about biology. It's about showing up every day, even when you don't know what you're doing." Sophie beamed, her gap-toothed smile radiant. "You gave me purple flowers and family dinners and a house full of laughter. You gave me the courage to want things I'd stopped believing I deserved." Ethan. "I promise to love you through burnt pancakes and perfect ones." Sophie. "I promise to be your mom through soccer games and school plays, through teenage years and beyond. You both saved me in ways you'll never fully understand. You're my family, my heart, my home." "Is it ring time?" Sophie whispered loudly. "Because I've been holding these for like forever." More laughter as Sophie produced the rings from a purple silk pouch, presenting them with the solemnity of a royal ceremony. The rings exchanged, the "I do's" said with voices strong. Despite tears, the officiant proclaimed them husband and wife. "You may kiss." Ethan was already kissing Victoria, dipping her slightly while the guests erupted in cheers. Sophie tugged on Ethan's jacket. "Family hug! Family hug!" They pulled her up between them, the three of them embracing as purple flower petals fell around them. Anna and Emma, throwing Sophie's carefully saved extras with enthusiasm. "We did it," Sophie announced. "We're officially a family." "We were always a family," Victoria corrected, adjusting Sophie's flower crown. "Now we just have paperwork." "And a party," Sophie reminded them, "with cake and dancing and Great Aunt Ruth's potato salad." The reception was everything Sophie had planned and more. The purple theme was everywhere from the tablecloths to the signature cocktails, purple cosmos for adults, purple lemonade for kids. Sophie and Emma performed their carefully rehearsed electric slide, dragging everyone onto the dance floor. Robert and Robert, both grandfathers with the same name, bonded over their shared name and their mutual adoration of Sophie. "Speech time," Anna announced, tapping a spoon against her glass. She told the story of Ethan's transformation of watching her brother come back to life. Mike told embarrassing college stories that made Ethan bury his face in Victoria's shoulder. Patricia spoke about second chances and the courage to love again, but it was Sophie who stole the show. "I wanted to say something," she announced, standing on a chair so everyone could see her. "When I was little, I used to wish on stars for a mom. Not because Dad wasn't enough, because he was always enough, but I wanted someone who would braid my hair and understand girl things and love Dad as much as I do." The tent was silent except for the soft sound of sniffling from multiple directions. Then Victoria came, and she was better than what I wished for. She doesn't just braid my hair, she teaches me about business and spreadsheets. She doesn't just love Dad, she loves me too, even when I'm annoying about wedding planning. "You were never annoying," Victoria called out. "I was a little annoying," Sophie admitted, making everyone laugh. "But you loved me anyway. And now you're not my bonus mom or my stepmom. You're just my mom. And Dad's not just Dad anymore. He's the guy who smiles all the time and sings in the shower and looks at Mom like she hung the moon." "Sophie," Ethan said, his voice warning, "it's true you do. And Mom looks at you the same way. And you both look at me like I'm the best thing ever, which I am, obviously." More laughter mixed with tears. "So I want to make a toast," Sophie said, raising her juice box. "To our family, to Dad, who was brave enough to offer a ride, to Mom, who was brave enough to accept it, and to me because I'm awesome and I planned most of this wedding. To Sophie!" Everyone chorused, laughing and crying in equal measure. The party continued late into the evening. There was dancing slow songs where Ethan and Victoria swayed together, while Sophie danced on Ethan's feet fast songs where everyone attempted Sophie's electric slide with varying degrees of success. There was cake, which was indeed chocolate inside despite its elegant white exterior. There were tears when Victoria threw her bouquet and Sophie caught it, announcing she was never getting married because she already had the best family. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Sophie fell asleep in Robert's, her grandfather's lap, exhausted from the excitement. Victoria and Ethan sat at their sweetheart table, watching their families clean up, everyone working together with the ease of people who belonged. "We did it," Victoria said softly. "We did it," Ethan agreed. "Mrs. Ward, I love how that sounds. I love you. I love you too. Both of you." They looked at Sophie, still asleep despite the activity around her. Her flower crown askew purple tulle dress wrinkled the biggest smile on her sleeping face. "Think she'll remember this when she's older?" Victoria asked. "Remember how we became a family?" "Every detail," Ethan said with certainty. "She's probably already writing the story in her head." "Once upon a time," Victoria began their tradition. "There was a little girl and her dad," Ethan continued, "who thought they had everything they needed," Victoria added, "but they were wrong," they said together. Looking at their sleeping daughter, their families now fully merged into one, their backyard wedding perfect in its imperfection. The stars were coming out overhead, the same stars Sophie used to wish on. But there was no need for wishes now. Everything they needed was right here in this backyard, in this family, in this love that had started with a simple offer of a ride home and had become everything.